I sat in my car outside the courthouse, watching my sister Meredith stumble down the stone steps, her designer heels catching on the concrete as tears streamed down her perfectly made-up face. For 8 long years, she had systematically seduced and stolen every single man I ever loved, starting with Tyler, my high school sweetheart, who promised me forever. Each theft was calculated precise, leaving me shattered while she collected my boyfriends like trophies. Now, after carefully orchestrating her introduction to Marcus Blackwood, a man with his own dark agenda, I watched justice unfold before my eyes. The first time Meredith stole someone from me, I was 22 and hopelessly in love with Tyler Morrison. We met in our junior year at the University of Michigan, both reaching for the same economics textbook in the campus bookstore. His smile lit up something inside me that I didn't even know existed. Our romance unfolded slowly, beautifully through late-night study sessions in the library, shared coffee at the small cafe on State Street, and long walks around campus as the leaves changed from green to gold. Tyler was everything I had dreamed about in a partner. He remembered how I took my coffee. 2 sugar splash of almond milk, texted me good morning every single day, and listened when I rambled about my marketing classes. He even attended my boring thesis presentation sitting in the front row with a bouquet of daisies because he knew roses made me sneeze. That Thanksgiving, I was bubbling with excitement to bring him home to meet my family in suburban Detroit. My parents had heard so much about him through our weekly phone calls, and even my younger sister Meredith had seemed excited to meet my boyfriend during our text exchanges. I should have recognized the predatory gleam in Meredith's eyes when she opened the front door that November afternoon. At 20, she carried herself with a confidence I had never possessed. While I was comfortable in my jeans and university sweatshirt, Meredith answered the door in a carefully chosen outfit that showed just enough skin to be noticeable, but not enough to be called out by our parents. "So this is the famous Tyler," she purred, her hand lingering a bit too long when they shook hands. "Rhonda hasn't stopped talking about you." The Thanksgiving dinner that followed felt like watching a slow-motion car accident. Meredith had positioned herself directly across from Tyler, leaning forward as she passed dishes, finding excuses to touch his hand when reaching for the gravy boat. She laughed too loudly at his jokes, asked probing questions about his future plans, and somehow managed to steer every conversation back to herself. "Tyler's interested in investment banking," I mentioned, trying to include everyone in the conversation. "Really?" Meredith's eyes sparkled. "I've been thinking about majoring in finance myself. Maybe you could give me some advice sometime." I watched Tyler's face flush as Meredith twirled her hair, a move she had perfected in high school. My stomach churned, but I pushed down the unease. This was my sister. She would never betray me like that. 3 weeks later, I surprised Tyler at his apartment with Chinese takeout from our favorite place, only to find the door slightly open. Strange sounds came from inside. My hands shook as I pushed the door wider, the white plastic bag of food dropping to the floor as I took in the scene before me. Meredith was in Tyler's bed, wrapped in the sheets I had helped him pick out at Target just a month earlier. "Rhonda," Tyler scrambled up, reaching for his boxers. "This isn't what it looks like." But Meredith just stretched like a satisfied cat, making no move to cover herself. "Actually, it's exactly what it looks like. Tyler and I are in love." The confrontation that followed was brutal. Tyler stammered through pathetic excuses while Meredith calmly got dressed, using my toothbrush from his bathroom counter to freshen up. The casualness of her cruelty took my breath away. "You've been texting him since Thanksgiving." I managed to choke out, scrolling through the messages Tyler's phone revealed when Meredith had tossed it to me with a smirk. "He texted me first." She shrugged, zipping up her boots. "Something about wanting finance advice." One thing led to another. The worst part came when I drove home shattered and sobbing, only to have my parents take Meredith's side. "Young love is unpredictable," my mother said, patting my shoulder absently while setting the table for dinner. "You can't control who people fall for, sweetie. Your sister didn't mean to hurt you." My father was even less sympathetic. Maybe this is a lesson about bringing boys home too soon. Meredith's younger, she doesn't know better. But I found out she did know better. 2 months later, while helping my mother clean out Meredith's room for repainting, I discovered her journal tucked behind her bookshelf. My hands trembled as I read her meticulous notes about Tyler observations she had made during that Thanksgiving dinner. She had studied everything I loved about him and crafted herself into his perfect woman. There were notes about his favorite movies, which she suddenly developed an interest in his career ambitions, which she began to share, even his preference for brunettes over blondes. She dyed her hair 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. The journal entry dated November 25th made my blood run cold. Phase 1 complete. R brought home a decent catch this time. Investment banking means good money. Time to trade up from my current loser boyfriend. Should take 3 weeks max if I play it right. R is so trusting she'll never see it coming. 2 years passed before I dared to date again. The wound Meredith and Tyler had left took time to scab over, though it never fully healed. They dated openly for 6 months, attending every family function together while I found excuses to be elsewhere. Their relationship eventually imploded when Meredith found someone with a bigger bank account, but by then, the damage to my ability to trust was complete. I met James Chen at my marketing job at a tech startup in Ann Arbor. He was the opposite of Tyler in every way that mattered. Where Tyler had been flashy and ambitious, James was steady and thoughtful. He worked as a software engineer, preferring quiet nights coding to the loud bars Tyler had frequented. James brought me lunch when I worked late, left encouraging sticky notes on my monitor, and never once made me feel like I needed to compete for his attention. For 6 months, I kept James away from my family. We built our relationship in a protective bubble, exploring Detroit's restaurant scene, taking weekend trips to Mackinac Island, creating inside jokes that made us burst into laughter at random moments. I told my family I was single, deflecting their questions with stories about focusing on my career. But secrets have a way of demanding revelation. My 26th birthday fell on a Saturday, and my mother insisted on a family dinner. I couldn't explain another absence without raising suspicions, so I finally agreed to bring James. Just dinner, I warned him as we drove to my parents' house. We eat, we leave. I have weird family dynamics. James squeezed my hand. Every family has weird dynamics, Ron. It'll be fine. I had prepped him minimally about Meredith, mentioning only that my sister and I had some tension over past boyfriends. I couldn't bring myself to explain the calculated cruelty, the journal, the pattern I was beginning to recognize. Meredith arrived 20 minutes late, of course, making an entrance in a red dress that would have been more appropriate for a nightclub than a family birthday dinner. Her eyes locked onto James, immediately assessing him like a leopard spotting prey. "You must be James," she cooed, somehow managing to insert herself between us. "I'm Meredith, the sister Rhonda probably didn't mention much." The dinner unfolded like a recurring nightmare. Meredith dominated the conversation, peppering James with questions about his work, his hobbies, his future plans. She found excuses to touch him constantly, adjusting his collar, brushing imaginary lint from his sleeve, touching his arm when she laughed at his responses. Then came the wine incident. As Meredith reached across the table for the salt, her elbow knocked over her glass of Merlot, sending it cascading down her dress. "Oh no," she gasped, jumping up. The wine had created a stain directly across her chest, drawing everyone's attention exactly where she wanted it. "James, could I borrow your jacket? I'm freezing now and this is so embarrassing." Before he could respond, she was slipping his sports coat over her shoulders, the oversized garment, making her look delicate and vulnerable. She kept it for the rest of dinner, despite the house being perfectly warm. "I should go clean up properly," she announced as dessert was served. "James, you're about my ex's height. Could you help me get something down from the hall closet? I can never reach that high shelf." I watched James follow her, my chocolate cake turning to ash in my mouth. They were gone for 15 minutes, while my mother chattered about her book club and my father dozed in front of the TV. When they returned, Meredith was wearing a different dress entirely, James's jacket still draped over her arm. Your sister needed help moving some boxes to find her spare clothes, James explained, but something in his expression had shifted. After dinner, as we walked to James's Honda Civic, Meredith appeared again. "My car won't start," she said, holding up her keys with practiced helplessness. "I think it's the battery." "James, you know about these things, right?" For 20 minutes, I stood in the cold Michigan wind while James poked around under the hood of Meredith's perfectly functional BMW, her leaning over him, asking questions about compression and alternators she didn't care about. When the car miraculously started, she hugged him in gratitude, her embrace lasting several seconds too long. The drive home was quiet. James seemed distracted, checking his phone at red lights. When I finally worked up the courage to ask if Meredith had said something to upset him, he shook his head. "She seems nice," was all he offered. "Different from you." Those 3 words echoed in my mind for the next 3 weeks as James became increasingly distant. He started working late, more often became vague about his weekend plans, and stopped leaving those sticky notes I had grown to love. When confronted, he insisted I was being paranoid, that work was just busy, that everything was fine. The text breakup came on a Thursday afternoon while I was presenting campaign metrics to clients. My phone buzzed on the conference table. "I don't think this is working out. We want different things. I'm sorry." That Saturday, Meredith's Instagram featured her and James at a concert in Royal Oak, her hand on his chest, both of them grinning at the camera. The caption read, "Sometimes the best things come when you least expect them." The photo had been taken at the venue where James and I had tickets for the following week. Tickets I had surprised him with for our 6-month anniversary. My coworker Sarah found me crying in the supply closet the following Monday. "Honey, what happened?" she asked, closing the door behind her. Between sobs, I told her everything. Sarah's face darkened as she listened. "Oh, Rhonda," she said quietly, "I didn't want to say anything, but James asked me about your sister the day after your birthday dinner. He wanted to know if she was single, said she seemed more fun and spontaneous than you. I told him to forget it, that it was inappropriate, but..." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. He had been planning to pursue her from that very first night, and Meredith had known it. They had probably exchanged numbers while getting her spare clothes out, setting up their secret communication channel while I sat at the dinner table, naive and trusting. This time when I confronted Meredith, she didn't even pretend to feel guilty. "James came to me," she said, examining her manicure as we stood in our parents' kitchen. "I can't help it if men find me more interesting than you. Maybe you should work on being less boring." The confrontation with Meredith after the James situation marked a turning point in our relationship. I had expected some remorse, some acknowledgement of the pain she was causing. Instead, I got a masterclass in gaslighting. "I'm actually doing you a favor," Meredith said, leaning against our mother's granite countertop with casual cruelty. "These men aren't loyal if they can be so easily stolen. I'm showing you their true character before you waste years on them." "You're destroying my life," I shouted, my composure finally cracking. "This is the second person you've taken from me." "Taken?" She laughed, a tinkling sound devoid of warmth. "Rhonda, you can't take a person. They choose. And they choose me because I'm more interesting, more confident, more everything you're not." When I brought my concerns to our parents hoping for support, or at least understanding, I was met with dismissal and victim blaming. "Meredith has always had a magnetic personality," my mother said, as if that excused everything. "You girls need to work this out between yourselves." My father was even less helpful. "Maybe you should date men who are more committed. If they can be swayed so easily, they weren't right for you anyway." The therapy sessions I started helped me process the betrayal, but couldn't protect me from future harm. Dr. Patricia Winters, a kind woman with silver hair and knowing eyes, helped me understand that Meredith's behavior stemmed from deeper issues, but understanding didn't equal protection. "You need boundaries," Dr. Winters advised. "Keep your romantic life separate from your family until you're certain of a relationship's stability." I took her advice to heart. When I met David Thornton 8 months later at Barnes & Noble in downtown Ann Arbor, I was determined to keep him far from Meredith's reach. David was reaching for the same copy of a newly released mystery novel when our hands touched. It was so cliché it should have been embarrassing, but his genuine laugh at the situation charmed me instantly. "Please take it," he offered, but I shook my head. "I'll wait for the paperback," I said. I'm Rhonda, devoted mystery reader and terrible decision maker when it comes to book budgets. "David," he grinned. "Fellow mystery addict and enabler of poor book buying decisions. How about I buy this one and lend it to you when I'm done? We could discuss it over coffee." Our relationship developed slowly, carefully. David was a high school English teacher patient and thoughtful in ways my previous boyfriends hadn't been. We bonded over Dorothy Sayers novels, spent Saturday mornings at estate sales hunting for first editions, and created our own two-person book club that met at various coffee shops around town. For 8 months, I lived a double life. I told my family I was focusing on my career, spending weekends at marketing conferences that were actually trips to used bookstores with David. I created elaborate lies about evening classes that were really dinners at his apartment where he cooked, while I read passages aloud from whatever we were currently discussing. The deception ate at me. David knew I had a complicated family situation, but respected my boundaries when I said I wasn't ready for introductions. He had met my friends, I had met his, but my family remained a locked door I couldn't open. "You know I love you, right?" he said one evening as we walked around Gallup Park. "Whenever you're ready to let me into all parts of your life, I'll be here." My carefully constructed walls came crashing down at a Saturday farmer's market in Carytown. David and I were examining heirloom tomatoes, debating whether to attempt homemade sauce, when a familiar voice cut through the crowd. "Rhonda, oh my goodness, what a surprise." Meredith stood there in designer athletic wear yoga mat under one arm, looking like she had stepped out of a wellness magazine. Her eyes immediately locked onto David, taking in his tall frame kind face and the way his hand rested protectively on my lower back. "I'm Meredith," she extended her hand before I could speak. "Rhonda's sister. She's told you about me, I'm sure." David, ever polite, shook her hand warmly. "Actually, she hasn't mentioned much about her family. I'm David. Nice to meet you." "Really?" Meredith's eyes glittered with malicious delight. "How mysterious of her. We simply must catch up." "Rhonda, why don't you bring David to Sunday dinner tomorrow? Mom would be devastated to know you've been hiding this handsome man." The trap was set before I could object. David, sensing tension but not understanding its source, agreed before I could fabricate an excuse. Meredith left with a satisfied smile, already plotting. What followed was a systematic campaign that would have impressed military strategists. Meredith suddenly developed a passion for mystery novels, texting me questions about authors she had never heard of before meeting David. She began frequenting the bookstore where we had met, always seeming surprised to run into us. Her car developed mysterious problems that always occurred near David's apartment building, requiring assistance from whoever happened to be nearby. The first red flag David couldn't ignore came 3 weeks after that farmer's market encounter. Meredith called him directly, sobbing about a bad breakup, claiming she had no one else to turn to. She had gotten his number from my mother, who had gotten it from my phone bill. "Your sister called?" David told me, concern creasing his forehead. "She sounded really upset. Maybe you should check on her." I knew it was a manipulation, but explaining years of psychological warfare in a way that didn't make me sound paranoid proved impossible. When I suggested Meredith was being dramatic, David's teaching instincts kicked in. "Everyone deserves compassion during heartbreak," he said gently. "Maybe this is a chance for you two to grow closer." The campaign intensified. Meredith joined the library's mystery book club, sitting next to David at meetings I suddenly couldn't attend due to work emergencies she had manufactured by calling my boss with fake client complaints. She volunteered at his school's literacy program, becoming the helpful sister who just wanted to support education. I watched helplessly as she employed tactics I now recognize, the casual touches The inside jokes, the manufactured vulnerability. She created crises that required David's specific assistance always when I was conveniently unavailable. The breaking point came when I decided to surprise David at his apartment with takeout from his favorite Thai place. I used my key to let myself in, calling out as I entered. The apartment was quiet, but his car was in the parking lot. Walking toward the bedroom, I heard voices. I just feel like Rhonda doesn't understand me. Meredith's voice drifted through the door. She's always been jealous of me, making up stories about me stealing boyfriends when really, these men just realized they connected with the wrong sister. I pushed open the door to find them sitting on David's bed. Meredith's hand on his knee, tears streaming down her face in a performance worthy of an Oscar. She was wearing my necklace, the one our grandmother had given me before she died, the one that had gone missing from my jewelry box 2 weeks earlier. Rhonda, David jumped up, but the guilty flush on his face told me everything. She's lying, I said quietly, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. Ask her about Tyler. Ask her about James. Ask her about the journal where she plans these thefts. But Meredith was already shifting into victim mode. See, this is what I mean. She's so paranoid, David. I came here for advice about winning my sister back, and she turns it into some conspiracy theory. The gaslighting that followed was masterful. David, trained to see the best in people, to believe in redemption and second chances, couldn't reconcile my stories with the crying woman in front of him. When I mentioned the missing necklace, Meredith claimed I had lent it to her months ago and forgotten. You're always forgetting things when you're stressed, she said softly, as if concerned. Remember when you forgot about Mom's birthday dinner because of work? That dinner had been another manipulation, Meredith telling me the wrong date. But David didn't know that. He saw a woman becoming increasingly agitated while her sister remained calm and concerned. We broke up that night, David claiming he needed space to think. By Sunday's family dinner, Meredith was wearing my grandmother's necklace, openly, her hand resting on David's arm as they announced they were taking things slow to respect my feelings. Isn't it nice that David's still part of the family? My mother beamed, oblivious to my pain. And Meredith, that necklace looks perfect on you. Your grandmother would be so pleased to see you wearing it. But the universe has a way of revealing truth. As I sat at that dinner table, watching Meredith perform her role as the caring sister who just happened to fall for her sister's ex, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a screenshot from Meredith's secret Instagram account, the one she didn't know her high school friend Brittany still had access to. The posts dated back months, documenting her research into David's interests, his schedule, his vulnerabilities. But the most damning evidence was a direct message exchange with someone named Ashley. Meredith. Phase 3 in progress. This one's almost too easy. Teachers are so gullible. Ashley. Girl, you're evil. Doesn't Rhonda suspect? Meredith. She knows, but no one believes her. I've been telling everyone she's unstable and jealous for years. Foundation work pays off. Ashley. What's the end game? Meredith. Same as always. Take what's hers, get bored, move on. It's not about the men. It's about winning. I saved the screenshot, finally having proof of what I had always known. Meredith didn't steal my boyfriends because she loved them. She stole them because she could, because taking them from me fed something dark inside her. As David passed the mashed potatoes, carefully avoiding eye contact with me, I realized something crucial. Meredith might have won this battle, but she had finally given me the ammunition for the war. The weeks following the David betrayal blurred together in a haze of pain and revelation. What made this theft particularly cruel was David's complete transformation from the thoughtful, empathetic man I had fallen in love with into Meredith's latest gaslit accomplice. You need help, Rhonda, David told me when I tried one last time to show him the evidence. We met at a neutral location, a Starbucks downtown where the public setting might keep things civil. These conspiracy theories about your sister are concerning. Meredith showed me the texts where you threatened her if she didn't stay away from me. What texts? I pulled out my phone, scrolling frantically. David, I never threatened her. She's fabricating evidence. He sighed, that teacher's sigh reserved for students who disappointed him. She has screenshots, Rhonda, time-stamped. Maybe you sent them during one of your episodes and don't remember. Episodes. The word hit me like a slap. What episodes? Meredith told me about your history of mental health issues, the paranoid delusions about people being out to get you. She's really worried we both are. The revelation that Meredith had been laying groundwork to discredit me for months, possibly years, shouldn't have surprised me. Yet sitting across from David, watching him look at me with pity instead of love, I felt something inside me finally shatter completely. The family dynamics grew increasingly toxic. Sunday dinners became theatrical performances where Meredith played the concerned sister while slowly poisoning everyone against me. She would mention my episodes, casually reference therapy sessions I had never attended for conditions I didn't have, express worry about my deteriorating mental state while wearing my grandmother's jewelry and sitting next to my stolen boyfriend. Maybe you should consider inpatient treatment, my mother suggested one evening as I helped clear dishes. Meredith found a nice facility that specializes in delusional disorders. I'm not delusional, Mom. She's stealing my boyfriend systematically. I have proof. My mother's face hardened. This again, honey, 3 different men have chosen to date your sister after meeting her through you. At some point, you need to look at the common denominator. The common denominator is Meredith targeting them. The common denominator, she said coldly, is you. The isolation was complete. Friends grew tired of hearing about Meredith's manipulations. Family members avoided me at gatherings, whispering about my jealousy issues when they thought I couldn't hear. Even Dr. Winters suggested we explore why I kept allowing these situations to happen, as if I was somehow complicit in my own torture. The final straw came when I discovered Meredith had gained access to my phone records through our shared family plan. My father, ever trusting of his youngest daughter, had given her administrative access for emergencies. She had been reading my texts for years, screening my calls, tracking my location. Every time I had tried to keep a relationship secret, she had known. Every lie I told about my whereabouts, she could verify. Every man who entered my life, she could research before I even knew his last name. I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by evidence no one would believe, screenshots of her secret social media photos of her wearing my missing jewelry, documentation of her lies. The weight of 8 years of systematic destruction pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. But in that darkness, something shifted. I opened my laptop and began researching not Meredith this time, but something entirely different. Narcissistic personality disorder, gaslighting techniques, how predators choose their victims, how they operate, how they eventually destroy themselves. The articles led me down a rabbit hole of psychology and pattern recognition. I learned about love bombing, devaluation, and discarding. I studied how emotional predators selected targets, how they isolated victims, how they created networks of enablers. Most importantly, I learned about their weaknesses, their need for control, their inability to resist a perfect target, their eventual self-destruction when faced with someone who played their game better than they did. As dawn broke through my apartment windows, illuminating the scattered papers and empty coffee cups, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being Meredith's victim. I was done trying to protect myself through distance and deception. I was done playing defense in a game where she had written all the rules. If Meredith fed on destroying my happiness, I would give her a feast that would ultimately poison her. The plan formed slowly, carefully. I spent weeks researching, preparing, transforming myself from prey into hunter. I studied successful women in business, practiced confidence in mirrors, upgraded my wardrobe with calculated precision. I wasn't becoming Meredith. I was becoming someone who could outmaneuver her. 3 months after David's betrayal, I attended a professional conference in Chicago. It was there at an upscale hotel bar that I first laid eyes on Marcus Blackwood. He was everything Meredith would find irresistible, devastatingly handsome, expensively dressed, oozing the kind of dangerous charisma that made smart women do stupid things. I watched him work the room, charming investors, flattering wives, calculating every interaction for maximum benefit. He was a predator like Meredith, but operating on a much grander scale, as he ordered another martini specifying a particular gin that cost more than most people's car payments. I saw my weapon. Our eyes met across the bar. I didn't smile, didn't approach, just held his gaze for a moment before returning to my conversation with a colleague. The hook was baited with indifference, the one thing men like Marcus couldn't resist. "I don't believe we've met," his voice came from behind me 20 minutes later. "Marcus Blackwood. I handle acquisitions for Blackwood Capital." I turned slowly, channeling every lesson Meredith had inadvertently taught me about manipulation. "Rhonda Palmer, I'm not interested in being acquired." He laughed, genuinely delighted by the rejection. We spent the next hour in a verbal sparring match that left him intrigued and me nauseated by the effort of maintaining a persona so contrary to my nature. When he asked for my number, I gave him my business card instead. "I don't mix business with pleasure," I said, gathering my things to leave. "What makes you think this would be business?" he called after me. I paused at the door, looking back with calculated disinterest. "Men like you are always business, Mr. Blackwood. The question is whether the ROI is worth the investment." Back in my hotel room, I immediately began my real research into Marcus Blackwood. What I found confirmed my initial assessment, but revealed so much more. Failed businesses left in his wake, women who had been financially and emotionally devastated, legal troubles that never quite stuck thanks to expensive lawyers and technicalities. His recently divorced wife, Catherine, had been particularly vocal on a private support group for financial abuse victims. Her story read like a cautionary tale: the whirlwind romance, the gradual financial entanglement, the systematic destruction of her credit and credibility, the eventual abandonment when her resources were depleted. Marcus Blackwood wasn't just a predator. He was a professional con artist with a pattern as predictable as Meredith's, but with far more devastating consequences. As I studied his victims' stories, learning his techniques and preferences, a beautiful, terrible synchronicity emerged. Meredith, who fed on emotional destruction and stealing what belonged to others, was about to meet someone who specialized in destroying women exactly like her. I thought about David probably reading mystery novels in bed while Meredith plotted her next move. I thought about James, who had revealed Meredith's gold-digging nature in their bitter breakup. I thought about Tyler, my first love, who had sent me a message 6 months after Meredith discarded him, apologizing for not believing me about her true nature. They had all been collateral damage in Meredith's war against me. Now it was time for her to face an opponent who wouldn't just break her heart, but systematically dismantle her entire life. The woman I saw in this hotel mirror that night wasn't the trusting, naive Rhonda who had brought Tyler home for Thanksgiving 8 years ago. She wasn't the broken woman who had sobbed in a supply closet over James, or the desperate sister who had tried to warn David. She was someone new, someone who had learned from the best teacher cruelty could offer. Someone who understood that sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to introduce them to a bigger predator. "Thank you, Meredith," I whispered to my reflection. "You've taught me everything I need to know." The next morning, I began phase 1 of my plan, knowing that for the first time in 8 years, I held all the cards. Meredith thought she was a master manipulator, but she was about to learn she had only been playing in the minor leagues. The game was about to change, and my sister had no idea she was about to become the prey. After the conference in Chicago, I returned to Michigan with a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to hide a relationship or protect my heart from my sister's machinations. Instead, I threw myself into personal growth with the dedication of someone who had finally found their purpose. I stopped dating entirely. My coworkers at the marketing firm noticed the change immediately. Sarah, who had witnessed my breakdown over James, commented on my new energy during a lunch break. "You seem different, Rhonda. Good different. Like you figured something out." "I have," I replied, stabbing my salad with newfound confidence. "I've figured out that I've been playing defense in a game I never signed up for. Time to stop playing altogether." My career flourished without the distraction of romantic drama. Within 6 months, I earned a promotion to marketing director, moved to a luxurious apartment in downtown Ann Arbor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and built genuine friendships with women who actually supported each other's success. Tuesday evenings became wine nights with my book club. Saturdays meant hiking with my running group. Sundays, I volunteered at the literacy center where David used to work, refusing to let Meredith's actions taint something I genuinely enjoyed. My family noticed the change too, though they misinterpreted it entirely. "I'm so glad you're finally over your jealousy issues," my mother commented during a rare visit to my new apartment. "Meredith mentioned you seem much more stable lately." I smiled, pouring her tea in my sunny kitchen. "Therapy works wonders, Mom. I've learned to accept that people make their own choices." What I didn't mention was that my therapy sessions with Dr. Winters had evolved from processing victimhood to understanding predatory psychology. We spent hours dissecting Meredith's patterns, not to heal from them, but to comprehend them completely. "You're studying her like a scientist," Dr. Winters observed during one session. "That's either very healthy detachment or preparation for something." "Can it be both?" I asked. She leaned back, regarding me over her glasses. "Just remember that becoming like those who hurt us isn't healing. It's perpetuating the cycle." "I'm not becoming like her," I assured her. "I'm just learning to speak her language." The universe seemed to agree with my new direction. It was at a work conference in Detroit, 8 months after my Chicago epiphany, that Marcus Blackwood re-entered my life. I was presenting our quarterly success metrics to potential clients when I noticed him in the back of the conference room. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, taking notes on a leather portfolio that screamed money. After my presentation, he approached during the networking break. "Rhonda Palmer," he said, that predatory smile unchanged. "Still not interested in being acquired." "Mr. Blackwood," I acknowledged coolly. "I didn't realize predatory investment fell under marketing services." "Everything falls under investment if you look at it right. Your firm's success metrics are impressive, but I'm more interested in the person behind them." "Dinner." I pretended to consider, then shook my head. "I have plans." "Tomorrow, then." "Busy all week, actually." He stepped closer, cologne expensive and subtle. "You know, most women find playing hard to get exhausting eventually." "Good thing I'm not playing then," I said, gathering my materials. "Excuse me, I have actual clients to attend to." I left him standing there, knowing the rejection would only intensify his interest. Men like Marcus couldn't resist a challenge, especially from women they perceived as beneath them socially or financially. Over the following weeks, Marcus escalated his pursuit. Flowers arrived at my office with increasingly personal notes. He appeared at professional events I attended, always with plausible business reasons. He even donated significantly to the literacy center, ensuring we'd cross paths at the donor gala. I maintained perfect indifference while secretly documenting everything. His patterns matched what his ex-wife, Catherine, had described in her support group posts: the grand gestures, the calculated coincidences, the gradual invasion of personal space. During this time, I also deepened my research into Marcus's history. Through careful social media investigation and public records, I built a comprehensive profile. He targeted women with specific characteristics: professionally successful but personally insecure, isolated from support systems, carrying emotional damage from past relationships. In other words, women exactly like what Meredith would become after years of empty conquest. The breakthrough in my research came from an unexpected source. Catherine Blackwood herself reached out after noticing my name on the Literacy Center's donor list next to her ex-husband's. We met for coffee in a discreet cafe in Bloomfield Hills where she lived post-divorce. Catherine was elegant despite her ordeal, carrying herself with the careful dignity of someone who had survived a war. "He's targeting you," she said without preamble. I recognized the pattern: the donations, the flowers, the persistent pursuit despite rejection. "I know," I replied simply. She studied me over her latte eyes, narrowing with understanding. "You're not a victim. You're hunting him." "Not him," I corrected. "He's just the weapon." What followed was 3 hours of the most educational conversation of my life. Catherine detailed Marcus's techniques with clinical precision, how he identified targets, the love bombing phase, the gradual financial manipulation, the isolation tactics, the eventual destruction. He's particularly drawn to women who think they're too smart to be conned, she explained. Women who pride themselves on being players rather than played. He sees it as a challenge, proving he's the apex predator. What made you vulnerable to him? I asked carefully. She laughed bitterly. Pride. I thought I was sophisticated, worldly, too clever to fall for a con. That arrogance blinded me to the red flags until I was too entangled to escape easily. How long did it take? From meeting to destruction. 18 months for the full cycle. 6 months of courtship. 6 months of escalating control. 6 months of systematic destruction. He's patient. That's what makes him dangerous. I took detailed notes, seeing Meredith in every warning sign Catherine described. My sister's arrogance, her certainty that she was always the smartest person in the room, her pride and her manipulation skills, they would all be her downfall. Why are you helping me? I asked as our conversation wound down. Catherine smiled sadly. Because I couldn't stop him legally. The system is built to protect men like Marcus, but maybe justice can come in other forms. Just promise me you won't become collateral damage in whatever you're planning. I won't, I assured her. I'm not the target, I'm just the bait. That evening, I finally responded to one of Marcus's dinner invitations, but with a twist. I suggested a very public charity event where Meredith would definitely be in attendance. A fundraiser for our old high school that my mother had been organizing for months. I'll be there with family, I warned him via text. It won't be a date. Even better, he responded immediately. I love meeting families. They reveal so much about a person. The trap was set. All that remained was ensuring Meredith would take the bait. For that, I needed to make myself appear to be everything Marcus desired in a woman successful but vulnerable, isolated but yearning for connection, damaged but hiding it poorly. In other words, I needed to play the role Meredith had forced me into for years, but this time as a performance rather than reality. The night before the fundraiser, I practiced in front of my bathroom mirror. I recreated the mannerisms of my former self. The slight hunch of shoulders that suggested defeat, the nervous laugh that indicated insecurity, the too eager smile that screamed, "Please love me." It felt like wearing an ill-fitting costume, but it was necessary. Marcus needed to see me as a perfect victim for Meredith to recognize him as perfect prey. You're really going through with this, Dr. Winters had said during our last session before the event. She's destroyed every relationship I've tried to build for 8 years, I replied. I could keep running, keep hiding, or I could end this once and for all. And if it backfires, if you get hurt in the process, I thought of all the pain Meredith had caused, all the men she'd stolen, not out of love but spite. All the family dinners where I'd been painted as the unstable one while she wore my grandmother's jewelry. Then at least I'll get hurt trying to fight back instead of just taking it, I said. That's growth, right? Dr. Winters didn't answer, but her concerned expression spoke volumes. As I prepared for the fundraiser, selecting clothes that suggested money, but not too much style, Meredith needed to feel superior. I thought about the conversations with Catherine, the patterns I'd identified, the careful orchestration required for my plan to work. Everything hinged on understanding both predators perfectly. Meredith's need to take what was mine, and Marcus's need to destroy women who thought they were players. Tomorrow night they would meet, and I would finally stop being the victim in my own story. The high school fundraiser was held at the Bloomfield Hills Country Club, a venue that reeked of old money and older prejudices. I arrived carefully calculated to be fashionably on time, wearing a black cocktail dress that was expensive enough to show success, but conservative enough to seem insecure about it. Marcus was already there holding court near the bar with several older businessmen who hung on his every word about market projections. He noticed me immediately, excusing himself with the smooth grace of a man who had perfected the art of social navigation. You look beautiful, he said, appearing at my elbow with 2 champagne flutes. though you seem nervous. Family events can be challenging. I accepted the glass with deliberately shaky hands. My family is complicated. I mentioned that. All families are complicated. The question is whether they're interesting complicated or tedious complicated. Before I could respond, I heard my mother's voice carrying across the room. Rhonda, there you are, sweetie. Come say hello to the Weatherbees. I touched Marcus's arm lightly, the first physical contact I'd initiated. Would you mind coming with me? It's easier with support. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction at this sign of vulnerability. Of course, lead the way. The next hour was a carefully choreographed dance. I introduced Marcus to various family friends, playing up his success while subtly undermining myself. I laughed too loudly at his jokes, sought his approval, with my eyes exhibited all the behaviors of a woman desperate for validation. Your daughter is delightful, Marcus told my mother when we finally reached her circle, though she's far too modest about her accomplishments. My mother, impressed by his obvious wealth and charm, preened under the attention. Rhonda's always been our quiet achiever, not like her sister Meredith. Now there's a girl who knows how to grab life by the horns. Sister Marcus's interest sharpened. I don't believe Rhonda's mentioned a sister. Right on, Kihu, Meredith made her entrance. She swept into the ballroom in a red designer gown that made my black dress look like funeral attire. David trailed behind her, looking uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo, a literature teacher out of place among the financial elite. Meredith's gaze swept the room with practiced assessment cataloging who mattered and who didn't. When her eyes landed on Marcus, I saw the exact moment she recognized him as prey. Not just any prey, premium prey. There she is, my mother gushed, waving Meredith over. My baby girl. Meredith glided across the floor, her movements deliberately sensual. David followed, already forgotten, despite being her actual date. I watched her transform in real time into hunting mode shoulders, back chin lifted, every gesture calculated for maximum impact. You must be the mysterious man who's captured Rhonda's attention, she purred, extending her hand to Marcus. I'm Meredith, the fun sister. Marcus took her hand, holding it a beat too long. Marcus Blackwood, and I'd argue that fun is subjective. Oh, I like you already. Meredith laughed, the tinkling sound I'd heard destroy so many of my relationships. Rhonda usually dates such serious types, teachers, engineers, you know? Stable but boring. Meredith, I protested weakly, playing my role perfectly. Marcus is an investment banker, very successful. Investment banking. Meredith's eyes lit up with genuine interest. How fascinating! I've always been intrigued by high finance. The risk, the reward, the power dynamics. David shifted uncomfortably beside her, recognizing the tone. He'd heard it before when she'd suddenly developed an interest in mystery novels. It's not for everyone, Marcus said smoothly. It requires a certain appetite for risk. Most people prefer safety. Safety is overrated, Meredith replied, her hand now resting on his arm. Don't you think Rhonda? I let my shoulders slump slightly. I suppose, though stability has its merits, right, David? David looked between the sisters' confusion clear on his face. Yes, stability is important. How refreshing, Marcus said to Meredith, ignoring David completely. So many people claim to embrace risk, but fold at the first real opportunity. The conversation continued with Meredith monopolizing Marcus's attention while I played the increasingly uncomfortable girlfriend. I excused myself to the bathroom after 20 minutes, timing it perfectly. When I returned, Meredith and Marcus were alone at the bar, heads tilted together in intimate conversation. David stood across the room talking to my father about lesson plans with the enthusiasm of someone desperately avoiding reality. I approached them with calculated hesitation. Marcus, I've been looking for you. Just getting better acquainted with your charming sister, he said, but his body language had shifted entirely toward Meredith. She was telling me about her interest in investment strategies. I didn't know you were interested in finance, I said to Meredith, knowing she'd never shown the slightest interest before tonight. There's a lot you don't know about me, she replied, her smile sharp as glass. Marcus was just explaining cryptocurrency portfolios, absolutely riveting. The rest of the evening unfolded exactly as I'd orchestrated. I grew increasingly clingy as Meredith became more bold. I mentioned marriage and children within earshot, watching Marcus subtly recoil. I talked about my desire for a quiet suburban life, while Meredith spoke of adventure and ambition. "Your sister is quite something," Marcus murmured when Meredith finally left to powder her nose. "Very different from you. She always gets what she wants," I said, letting bitterness color my voice. "Always has always will. And what about what you want?" I looked at him with practiced desperation. "I want someone who chooses me. Just once, I want to be someone's first choice." The pity in his eyes was almost insulting. Here was a man who had destroyed dozens of women feeling superior to me. Perfect. The evening concluded with Marcus taking my number again to plan a proper date. But I saw him slip Meredith his business card when he thought I wasn't looking. She tucked it into her clutch with the satisfied smile of a hunter who just spotted premium game. During the drive home, Marcus had conveniently been called away on urgent business. Rather than see me safely to my car, I allowed myself one genuine smile in the darkness. The first phase was complete. Over the following week, I maintained the charade. I texted Marcus with increasing frequency and desperation. I showed up at his office with lunch only to be turned away by security. I left voicemails that grew progressively more emotional. Meanwhile, Meredith was busy conducting her own campaign. She broke up with David via text. He later told me she said he lacked ambition, cleared her social calendar, and began her transformation into Marcus's perfect woman. "I'm worried about Meredith," my mother called to tell me. "She's been asking about investment properties and offshore accounts. Since when does she care about such things?" "Maybe she's finally growing up," I suggested innocently, thinking about her future. Well, that Marcus fellow seemed very knowledgeable. Perhaps he could give her some advice. "I'm sure he'd be happy to," I agreed, knowing Marcus had already taken Meredith to dinner twice that week. The trap was working perfectly. Meredith thought she was stealing another boyfriend, securing a wealthy target who could fund the lifestyle she'd always craved. Marcus thought he'd identified his next victim, a beautiful woman with just enough intelligence to be interesting, but not enough wisdom to see through him. Neither realized they were dancing to choreography I had designed. 3 weeks after the fundraiser, Meredith made her move. She showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning wearing designer workout clothes and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into my living room. "About Marcus." "What about him?" I asked, wrapping my robe tighter, playing the role of a woman who'd just woken up alone again. "He's not right for you, Rhonda. You must see that. He needs someone more dynamic, someone who understands his world. Someone like you." She at least had the grace to pretend to look conflicted. "I didn't mean for this to happen, but there's a connection between us that can't be denied. He's already ended things with you, hasn't he?" I let my face crumble, tears coming easily after years of practice. "He said I was too clingy, too desperate, too focused on settling down." "Oh, honey," Meredith said, her sympathy as fake as her eyelashes. "You just haven't found the right person yet. Someone who appreciates your stability." "I loved him," I whispered. "You love the idea of him," she corrected. "But Marcus needs someone who can match his energy, his ambition. I'm doing you a favor, really. Better to find out now than after you'd invested more time." The irony of her words, talking about investment while walking into the biggest trap of her life, was almost too perfect. "Just be careful," I said, looking up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Marcus seems almost too good to be true." "That's because you don't understand men like him," she said, already dismissing my concerns. "But don't worry, I know exactly how to handle Marcus Blackwood." She left with the satisfied air of a conqueror, never noticing the small smile that played at my lips as I closed the door. Meredith thought she was playing her usual game, see what Rhonda has, take it, discard it when bored. But this time the game had different rules, and the prize she thought she was stealing, it was poisoned bait, perfectly designed for a predator who'd forgotten that sometimes predators become prey. Meredith and Marcus's romance unfolded like a masterclass in mutual manipulation, though only one of them knew there were actually 3 players in the game. I watched from the sidelines, maintaining my heartbroken facade while documenting every step of their toxic tango. The social media posts started within days. Meredith at exclusive restaurants, her smile bright against the backdrop of crystal chandeliers. Marcus's hand proprietarily on her waist at gallery openings. Weekend trips to Manhattan and photos from the Four Seasons champagne brunches in penthouses I knew Marcus didn't own. "Your sister seems happy," Sarah commented during lunch scrolling through Instagram. "Though this seems fast even for her." "Meredith always moves fast when she sees something she wants," I replied, picking at my salad. "I just hope she knows what she's getting into." The transformation in Meredith was remarkable to witness. Gone were the casual designer clothes replaced by high-end couture that mysteriously appeared despite her part-time marketing coordinator salary. She traded her BMW for a Maserati, claiming Marcus had gotten her a deal through his connections. At family dinners, she dominated conversations with stories of Marcus's supposed wealth and influence. "He's considering buying a yacht," she announced one Sunday while my mother served pot roast on the same china we'd used since childhood. "He says every serious investor needs assets that appreciate while providing lifestyle value." "How wonderful," my mother beamed. "When do we get to meet him properly? Perhaps a family dinner?" "Oh, Marcus is far too busy for simple family dinners," Meredith said, the insult sliding smoothly into conversation. "We're actually flying to Monaco next week. He has business there." David, who had been invited despite the awkwardness my mother believed in maintaining connections, caught my eye across the table. I saw the recognition there, the memory of Meredith's sudden interests aligning with her target's world. "Investing in offshore accounts," he asked quietly. "That seems risky." Meredith's laugh was sharp. "Not everyone is content with a teacher's salary, David. Some of us have bigger aspirations." The cruelty was unnecessary, but it revealed how deeply Marcus had already influenced her. She was adopting his mannerisms, his casual dismissal of anyone deemed beneath notice. The sweet venom that had once been subtle was becoming obvious poison. 3 months into their relationship, I received an unexpected call from Marcus himself. I let it go to voicemail, listening to his smooth voice explain he needed to discuss a delicate matter regarding your sister. We met at a small cafe downtown Marcus, looking every inch the successful businessman despite the casual setting. I arrived deliberately early, watching him enter and scan the room with predatory assessment before settling on my corner table. "Thank you for meeting me," he began, ordering an espresso that cost more than most people's lunch. "I find myself in need of familial insight." Regarding Meredith, I kept my voice carefully neutral. "She's quite remarkable," he said, but I caught the calculating glint in his eyes. "Perhaps too remarkable. I wonder if you might illuminate some of her history for me." I pretended to hesitate, then launched into a carefully prepared narrative. I told him about Meredith's pattern with men, but framed it as ambitious social climbing rather than sister-targeted cruelty. I mentioned her expensive tastes, her impatience with financial constraints, her belief that she deserved the finest things in life. "She's never been satisfied with ordinary," I concluded. "Even as children, she wanted what others had, but bigger, better, more expensive. And her resources for maintaining such standards? Family money." I lied smoothly. "Our grandmother left her a substantial trust. She doesn't like people knowing, prefers they think her success is self-made." I watched his pupils dilate slightly at the mention of a trust fund. The predator, scenting blood in the water. "How substantial?" he asked casually. I shouldn't say. I demurred, then pretended to cave, but enough that she's never had to actually work. The jobs are just for appearance. Every word was calculated poison, designed to make Meredith appear to be the perfect mark, wealthy, vulnerable, and convinced of her own superiority. I painted her as Marcus's ideal victim while she thought she was playing him. "You're very candid about your sister," he observed. "One might expect more loyalty." I let my mask slip slightly, showing the years of genuine pain. "Loyalty goes both ways, Mr. Blackwood. Meredith has taken everything I've ever valued. If she's finally met someone who can match her, Well, perhaps that's justice. He studied me for a long moment and I saw him recalculating. I wasn't the bitter, clingy ex-girlfriend anymore. I was a potential ally in whatever scheme he was building around my sister. She mentioned you'd been close once, he probed. Before she discovered she preferred my boyfriends to her own, I said flatly. But you know that already. You were supposed to be mine after all. Supposed to be is a weak position, he said. I prefer certainties. So does Meredith. She's certain she's won you. Certain she's trading up from the teacher to the banker. Certain her trust fund makes her your equal rather than your target. The word target hung between us. Marcus's smile turned genuine for the first time, recognizing a kindred spirit in manipulation. You're more interesting than you initially appeared, Rhonda. No, I corrected. I'm exactly as interesting as I appeared. You just weren't looking at me. Neither of you were. That's always been my advantage, being overlooked. I left him with that thought, paying for my untouched tea and walking out with the quiet confidence of someone who had just successfully planted seeds of destruction. The escalation of their relationship accelerated after that meeting. Marcus began pushing for financial commitments from Meredith, framing them as investment opportunities and joint ventures that proved commitment. She liquidated her actual savings first, the small inheritance from our grandmother that she'd been saving. Then came the credit cards maxed out on luxury goods that Marcus assured her were investments in their image. Image is everything in high finance, she parroted at family dinners. Marcus says perception creates reality in investment circles. My parents, dazzled by the glamour and completely ignorant of the mounting debt, encouraged every excess. They co-signed loans when Meredith's credit ran out, believing they were investing in their daughter's brilliant future. The proposals began after month 4. Not official proposals. Marcus was far too clever for that. Instead, he spoke of commitment ceremonies and partnership contracts, keeping Meredith constantly expecting a ring that never quite materialized. He wants to do it right, she told me during one of her gloating visits. She'd stopped by to show off a new Hermes bag, making sure I saw the price tag she'd forgotten to remove. In Monaco, he says, or maybe Dubai, somewhere worthy of our love story. How romantic, I murmured. Though expensive, destination weddings can cost a fortune. Money is just paper, she said, waving dismissively. Marcus taught me that. What matters is leveraging assets for maximum return. And what assets are you leveraging? Her smile turned predatory. Wouldn't you like to know? Let's just say Marcus appreciates that I'm not some clingy, desperate woman begging for commitment. I'm an equal partner in our empire. The empire was built on quicksand, but Meredith couldn't see it. She was too blinded by designer goods and 5-star experiences to notice the paperwork she signed without reading the access she granted to accounts, the subtle isolation, as Marcus found reasons why her friends and family weren't sophisticated enough for their circle. Even David tried to warn her, reaching out despite their brutal breakup. I heard about it from my mother, who was scandalized that he'd dare contact Meredith after she'd upgraded. He said Marcus seemed like a con man, my mother huffed. Can you imagine that poor teacher, so obviously jealous of Marcus's success? Meredith was right to block his number. 6 months in the cracks began to show, though Meredith worked hard to hide them. The designer clothes remained but were recycled in carefully spaced intervals. The social media posts became less frequent, the locations less exclusive. She stopped mentioning specific plans, speaking instead in vague terms about big things coming. I maintained my distance, playing the bitter sister nursing wounds while secretly monitoring every development. Catherine Blackwood proved invaluable, sharing her own experience to help me anticipate each phase. Month 7 is when he'll start the serious financial exploitation, she predicted during one of our discreet coffee meetings. He's built trust, isolated her, made her dependent on the lifestyle. Now comes the harvest. Will she see it coming? Catherine's smile was sad. Did I was a Harvard MBA with 15 years in finance. Your sister is a part-time marketing coordinator with delusions of grandeur. She won't see anything until it's too late. The tragedy was that Catherine was wrong about one thing. Meredith wasn't delusional about her grandeur. She had successfully destroyed multiple lives to feed her ego. She just never expected to meet someone who played the game better than she did. As their relationship approached the 8-month mark, I prepared for the next phase. The false romance had served its purpose, binding Meredith to Marcus through greed, pride, and the unshakable belief that she was the predator in their relationship. Now came the wedding plans, the beginning of the end for my sister's carefully constructed world. And I would watch it all unfold from my front row seat, the overlooked sister who had orchestrated every movement in this deadly dance. The hunter had become the hunted, and she still didn't even know the game had begun. The engagement announcement came via a family group text on a Tuesday morning. A photo of Meredith's hand sporting a massive diamond ring, followed by dozens of champagne emojis and the words, "I said yes to my forever wedding, planning starts now." I stared at the ring, recognizing it immediately from Catherine's divorce documents. The same setting, the same cut, probably even the same stone. Marcus recycled everything, including engagement rings from failed cons. My phone rang within minutes, my mother breathless with excitement. "Isn't it wonderful? Meredith is engaged. Oh, Rhonda, I know this must be hard for you, but try to be happy for your sister." "Of course, Mom," I said, injecting just enough wistfulness into my voice. "When's the wedding?" "She's thinking June in Saint-Tropez. Can you imagine?" Though that's only 7 months away. I told her that's not enough time for proper planning, but she invests Marcus has connections who can make it happen. 7 months. I did quick mental math comparing it to Catherine's timeline, right on schedule for Marcus to extract maximum resources before disappearing. The wedding planning consumed Meredith completely. She quit her part-time job, declaring she needed to focus on creating the social event of the decade. She hired planners, florists, and designers, all recommended by Marcus, all requiring substantial deposits up front. The venue alone is $50,000, she told me during one of her visits. She'd taken to stopping by my apartment to show off wedding materials, each visit, a carefully orchestrated reminder of what she'd won. "That seems excessive," I ventured. "What about a nice local country club?" Her laugh was sharp with disdain. "This is what you never understood, Rhonda. Why you could never keep a man like Marcus. You think small. Marcus and I were building something magnificent." "Who's paying for this magnificence?" "We are," she said, but her eyes shifted slightly. "It's an investment in our future." Marcus explained how the connections we'll make at our wedding will pay dividends for years. The "we" was telling. Meredith had always been precise about financial ownership, but now she was blurring lines, mixing her resources with Marcus's phantom wealth. I watched her max out credit card after credit card, each one acquired with increasing difficulty as her credit score plummeted. She liquidated her 401k, calling retirement savings thinking poor. She sold her jewelry, except for my grandmother's necklace, which she still wore like a trophy. "Maybe you should slow down," I suggested during one planning session she'd insisted I attend. "Get married first, then have a reception later when finances are more stable." "Spoken like someone who's never been truly loved," she snapped. "Marcus wants to give me the world. Why would I insult him by suggesting we settle for less?" The wedding industry vultures circled, sensing desperation and unlimited spending. Dress shopping became an odyssey of couture gowns, each more expensive than the last. Meredith settled on a $40,000 Monique Louillier creation that required multiple fittings in Los Angeles. "It's an investment piece," she justified to our stunned mother. "I can sell it after the wedding for at least half the value." But I noticed how her hands shook slightly as she signed the purchase order, how she avoided looking at the total, how she immediately changed the subject to flower arrangements that would cost the same as a car down payment. Marcus, meanwhile, remained curiously absent from most planning sessions. He was always traveling for business, dealing with urgent investments, handling deals that couldn't wait. He sent gifts, designer shoes, spa packages, jewelry that Meredith didn't realize was rented, but never seemed available for vendor meetings or financial discussions. He trusts me completely, Meredith explained when the wedding planner asked about Marcus's involvement. He says I have impeccable taste. The only thing he cares about is that I'm happy. The planner, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria, exchanged glances with her assistant. I'd researched Victoria carefully. She'd planned 3 weddings for Marcus's previous victims, none of which had actually happened. She knew the pattern but continued collecting her fees. The guest list became another source of financial hemorrhaging. Meredith insisted on inviting every influential person Marcus had ever mentioned, requiring a venue change to accommodate 300 guests instead of the original 150. The new location, a chateau in Saint-Tropez, required a $100,000 deposit, non-refundable. "I'll need your help with something," Meredith said one evening, appearing at my door with a folder of legal documents. "Just a tiny favor." The tiny favor was co-signing for a wedding loan, $150,000 at predatory interest rates sold by a company I traced back to Marcus's network of associates. "I can't co-sign this," I said, reviewing the documents. "The interest alone would destroy anyone's finances." "Not when Marcus's deals come through," she insisted. "He just needs liquidity for the wedding. Once his overseas investments clear, we'll pay it off immediately. Then have him co-sign." Her face darkened. "He can't right now. Something about SEC regulations and conflict of interest, but it's just temporary." I refused, watching her cycle through manipulation tactics, guilt, anger, promises of reciprocation, even tears. When nothing worked, she stormed out, but not before delivering a parting shot. "You've always been jealous of me," she hissed. "Now that I'm finally getting everything I deserve, you can't stand it. Well, watch me succeed without you." She found other co-signers. Our parents, already leveraged from previous loans, used their home equity. An aunt who'd always favored Meredith signed on. Even some of Meredith's remaining friends, caught up in wedding fever, and promises of being in the bridal party, contributed to various funds. The hen party planning reached absurd heights. A week in Dubai, first-class flights for 12 women, a private yacht, personal shoppers, spa treatments. Meredith created a wedding website detailing the expected attire for each event. Designer labels mandatory. "Your sister has lost her mind." David texted me one evening. He'd been removed from all wedding communications but heard updates through mutual friends. "Someone needs to stage an intervention." "She wouldn't listen," I replied. "You know how she is when she wants something." "This is different. This is self-destruction on a massive scale." If only he knew how right he was. But I couldn't break character, couldn't reveal my role in the unfolding tragedy. Instead, I continued playing the bitter but concerned sister, watching Meredith sprint toward financial ruin with the single-minded determination of someone who believed they were running toward paradise. The breaking point came during a dress fitting in downtown Birmingham. Meredith had invited our mother and me, wanting witnesses to her triumph. As the seamstress made final adjustments to the $40,000 gown, Meredith's phone rang. "Marcus, darling," she answered brightly. "Yes, I'm at the fitting." "What? But you said—" "I don't understand." Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, panic. She stepped away, lowering her voice, but we could still hear fragments. "Frozen." "What do you mean, frozen? The wedding is in 8 weeks." She hung up, composing herself before turning back to us with a brittle smile. "Small hiccup with some international transfers," she said. "Marcus says it's just bureaucratic nonsense. These things happen with overseas accounts." But I saw the fear in her eyes, the first crack in her certainty. She'd invested everything, financially, emotionally, socially, in this wedding. The possibility of it not happening was literally unthinkable for her. "Maybe postpone," my mother suggested gently. "Give yourself more time to sort finances." "Absolutely not," Meredith snapped. "Everything is on track. Marcus handles millions in investments. A little paperwork issue is nothing." She turned back to the mirror, smoothing the elaborate gown, adjusting the veil that cost more than most people's monthly salary. In the reflection, I caught her expression when she thought no one was looking, pure terror masked by desperate determination. The seamstress, who'd clearly seen this before, quietly processed the final payment on Meredith's credit card. It declined twice before going through on the third attempt. Just a glitch. Meredith laughed, the sound high and strained. These banks and their security protocols. As we left the boutique, Meredith walking carefully in her designer heels, I reflected on the irony of the situation. She'd stolen my boyfriend's out of spite, built her ego on taking what was mine. Now she was losing everything, not to me, but to her own greed and blindness. The wedding plans continued their momentum even as the foundation crumbled beneath them. Invitations were sent, flights were booked, arrangements were confirmed. Meredith pushed forward with the determination of someone who believed sheer will could overcome reality. But reality has a way of collecting its debts. And Marcus Blackwood, he was an expert debt collector preparing for his final harvest, while his bride-to-be planned a wedding that would never happen. The countdown to destruction had begun, and Meredith was the only one who didn't hear the ticking clock. The unraveling began subtly like hairline fractures in expensive china. Small inconsistencies in Marcus's stories that Meredith, in her desperation to maintain the facade, chose to ignore or explain away. It started with the Monaco business trip that got mysteriously canceled. Regulatory issues, Marcus explained over dinner at Meredith's apartment. I'd been invited to discuss bridesmaid dresses, a cruel reminder of my supposed lesser status. The deal will close eventually, just not in time for us to scout wedding venues. But we already put deposits down on the flights, Meredith said, her voice carefully controlled. Consider it a tax write-off, he replied smoothly. Besides, I've found an even better venue option in Saint-Tropez. The owner owes me a favor. Meredith brightened at this, but I noticed how she unconsciously touched her neck, where our grandmother's necklace usually sat. She'd been wearing it less lately, claiming it didn't match her new designer aesthetic. The strange charges appeared next. During one of our forced, sisterly lunches, Meredith's card was declined for a $30 salad. That's impossible, she muttered, pulling out another card. I just paid this off last week. She checked her phone, scrolling through banking apps with increasing alarm. Multiple charges to companies she didn't recognize: Blackwood Consulting, MBI Investments, Premium Lifestyle Services. Marcus must have used the wrong card, she said quickly, noticing my observation. We have some joint expenses for the wedding. He'll sort it out tonight. But that night came and went with Marcus suddenly unreachable due to emergency meetings in Singapore. The charges continued mounting, thousands of dollars draining from accounts Meredith thought were secure. I'm sure there's an explanation, she insisted when I found her crying in her car outside our parents' house the following week. Marcus handles complex financial instruments. Sometimes money needs to move quickly for investments. Without telling you, he's protecting me from the stress, she said, but her hands shook as she reapplied lipstick in the rearview mirror. You wouldn't understand. You've never been with someone who operates at this level. The investment accounts were next to reveal their true nature. Meredith had been bragging for months about the portfolio Marcus was building for their future. She'd shown me screenshots of impressive balances, talked about diversification strategies she clearly didn't understand. When she tried to access them for wedding expenses, she discovered the truth. The accounts were viewing-only demos, the kind financial advisors use for presentations. The hundreds of thousands in supposed assets were as real as monopoly money. It's a security feature, she explained to herself more than me when I stopped by to find her surrounded by printouts and laptops. Marcus said high net worth accounts have different access protocols. Have you ever successfully withdrawn anything from these accounts? I haven't needed to, she snapped. Marcus handles our major expenses. These accounts are for our future. But doubt was creeping in, visible in the way she obsessively checked her phone, the way she flinched when bills arrived, the way she'd started selling her designer goods on consignment to declutter before the wedding. The tipping point came when Marcus's ex-wife reached out directly. Catherine Blackwood had maintained distance throughout my plan, but something, perhaps conscience, perhaps recognition of Meredith's desperation, prompted her to break silence. The message came through Facebook, a platform Meredith had neglected in favor of Instagram's glossier interface. I only knew about it because Meredith screenshot it and sent it to me with shaking hands. Your sister is either in on the con or about to become his next victim. Marcus Blackwood destroyed my life with the same promises he's making you. The yacht doesn't exist. The overseas accounts are fictional. The connections are all people he's scammed or is planning to scam. Run while you can still recover. Catherine. She's just bitter, Meredith said when I called her after receiving the screenshot. Marcus warned me she might try this. She can't stand that he's found real love. She's trying to warn you, Meredith. She's trying to sabotage my happiness. The edge of hysteria in her voice was new, just like everyone else. You, David, all the friends who suddenly can't afford to come to the wedding, you all want me to fail. She hung up before I could respond. When I tried calling back, I'd been blocked. The isolation Marcus had carefully constructed was complete, but not in the way he'd planned. As Meredith's financial situation deteriorated, she pushed away anyone who questioned the narrative. Friends who suggested postponing the wedding were cut off. Family members who expressed concern were accused of jealousy. Only our parents remained in her inner circle, and only because they were too financially entangled to express doubt. They'd taken out a second mortgage to help with wedding costs, believing Marcus's promises about repayment after his deals closed. Then Marcus disappeared for 10 days. No warning, no explanation beyond a text about urgent business in Hong Kong. Meredith's social media went quiet during his absence, the daily posts about wedding planning and couple goals suddenly stopping. I drove by her apartment one evening to find her car gone. Repossessed, I learned later the payments months overdue despite the loan my parents had co-signed. She'd been taking Ubers everywhere, paying with the last functioning credit card. When Marcus finally resurfaced, his explanation was smooth but wearing thin. Market volatility, regulatory delays, temporary liquidity issues that would resolve before the wedding. He brought gifts, a new handbag, designer sunglasses. But Meredith's eyes were hollow when she wore them. I need you to return the bridesmaid dress, she told me 2 weeks before the supposed wedding date. We're scaling back some elements, making it more intimate. What about the deposits, the venue? Postponed, she said quickly. Not canceled, just postponed until Marcus's business stabilizes. But the wedding vendors told a different story. The chateau in Saint-Tropez had canceled the reservation after the final payment bounced. The caterers were threatening legal action. The dress boutique was holding her $40,000 gown hostage until payment cleared. Meredith maintained the illusion with increasing desperation. She sent updates about venue changes and aesthetic pivots, each explanation more elaborate than the last. The 300-person guest list became an intimate gathering of 50. Saint-Tropez became a lovely local venue Marcus found through connections. The final crack came when she tried to sell our grandmother's necklace. I found the listing on a high-end jewelry resale site, the piece our grandmother had specifically left to me that Meredith had stolen years ago, now priced for quick sale. I bought it anonymously using a shell account I'd created for monitoring her desperation. When I messaged asking about the piece's provenance, Meredith's response was telling, "Family heirloom, need gone, ASAP, price negotiable for immediate payment." She'd reached the point where even her trophies, her symbols of victory over me, were expendable. The woman who'd stolen everything I loved was selling off her spoils to maintain an illusion that everyone else could see through. The night before the original wedding date, Marcus sent a final message. "Delayed in Shanghai, deal complications, will make it up to you, M." Meredith posted it on Instagram with heart emojis and hashtags about true love surviving anything. But the comments were turned off. The likes were sparse. Even her digital audience had recognized the performance for what it was. I sat in my apartment that night looking at our grandmother's necklace that I'd finally reclaimed and felt an unexpected wave of sadness. Not satisfaction or vindication, just a hollow recognition of waste. Meredith had built her entire identity on taking what was mine, and now she was losing everything to someone who'd played her own game better than she ever could. The collapse was accelerating. The wedding that would never happen was just the beginning. Marcus had one final phase to execute. and Meredith was walking into it with her eyes wide open but refusing to see. The morning that should have been Meredith's wedding day dawned gray and drizzling, pathetic fallacy at its finest. I woke to find 17 missed calls from my mother and a series of increasingly frantic texts. "Marcus is gone. Meredith is hysterical. Please come." I arrived at my parents' house to find chaos. Meredith sat at the kitchen table, still in her pajamas, her face blotchy from crying, surrounded by the detritus of her collapsed dreams. Printed emails, bank statements, wedding contracts with "canceled" stamped across them in red. "He's not answering," she kept repeating, hitting redial on her phone. Something must have happened. An accident. He wouldn't just disappear. My mother hovered nearby, wringing her hands, while my father sat in his recliner, staring at paperwork with the hollow expression of a man watching his retirement evaporate. "When did you last hear from him?" I asked gently, sitting across from Meredith. 3 days ago. He said the Shanghai deal was taking longer than expected." She showed me the text, her hands shaking. "But look, he used our special emoji. He wouldn't do that if something was wrong." The special emoji was a heart with a $sign, which seemed grotesquely appropriate given the circumstances. "Have you checked the apartment?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from my morning reconnaissance. "The landlord says we're 3 months behind on rent," she whispered. "That's impossible. Marcus handles the rent. It's automatic." "What about his office?" "There is no office," my father interjected flatly. "I drove there this morning. The address he gave us is a WeWork space. The receptionist has never heard of Blackwood Capital." The full scope of the disaster began emerging as the morning progressed. Every vendor called demanding payment. The wedding planner arrived in person, accompanied by a process server. Creditors who'd been held at bay by promises of payment after the wedding descended like carrion birds. 27,000 for flowers. Meredith read from one invoice, her voice mechanical. 15,000 for photography. 8,000 for the cake. How did it get so expensive? "Because you insisted on the best," my mother snapped, stress finally overcoming her favoritism. "Marcus this, Marcus that. We mortgaged our house for your fairy tale." The accusation hit Meredith like a physical blow. She looked around the kitchen as if seeing it for the first time, calculating its worth against her debt. "He'll be back," she insisted. "This is just a misunderstanding. His deals are complicated. International finance has delays." But her phone rang then, and the name on the screen made her face go white. "Detective Patricia Morse, Financial Crimes Division." The investigation had begun. As Meredith spoke in increasingly panicked tones, I pieced together the scope of Marcus's con. He'd used her name for everything: the apartment lease, the vendor contracts, even some suspicious wire transfers to offshore accounts. On paper, Meredith looked like she was running a fraud scheme with Marcus as her invisible partner or victim, depending on how you read the evidence. "They're freezing my accounts," she said after hanging up her voice, small and confused. "They say there's a suspicious activity, possible money laundering." "What exactly did Marcus have you sign?" my father demanded. "Investment documents, partnership agreements. He said it was for tax purposes to maximize our returns." "Did you read them?" "He explained them to me," she said defensively. "I trusted him." The house of cards collapsed with stunning speed. By afternoon, we learned the true extent of the damage. Meredith owed over $400,000 to various creditors. Her credit score had plummeted to the 400s. She was named in 3 lawsuits and under investigation for fraud. "But I'm the victim," she screamed at the detective who came to take her statement. "Marcus conned me." "Ma'am, we have documents with your signature authorizing transfers to accounts linked to criminal enterprises. We have contracts where you're listed as CEO of companies that don't exist. Either you're complicit or you sign things without reading them. Neither looks good." The parallel to all her victims was lost on Meredith. Tyler, James, David, they'd all trusted her, signed their hearts over without reading the fine print. Now she sat in the same position but with consequences far beyond heartbreak. "I need a lawyer," she said finally, the reality sinking in. "With what money?" my father asked bitterly. "You've destroyed us all." The family meeting that evening was brutal. My parents laid out their financial situation, second mortgage payments they couldn't afford, retirement accounts, drained credit cards, maxed out for wedding expenses. They faced potential bankruptcy at an age when starting over seemed impossible. "We'll have to sell the house," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "Downsize to an apartment, if we can even qualify for one now." "I'll fix this," Meredith promised desperately. "I'll get a job, work multiple jobs. I'll pay everyone back." "With your reputation," my father laughed bitterly. "You're under criminal investigation. Who's going to hire you?" The cruelest blow came from an unexpected source. Marcus's other victims, emboldened by the investigation, began reaching out. Women from across the country sharing their stories, comparing notes, building a case. Meredith's name appeared in every story as the latest fool, but with a twist. She'd lasted longer and lost more than any previous victim. "He usually cuts and runs after 6 months," one woman told her during a conference call the detective arranged. "You made it almost 9. What was different?" What was different, though, Meredith didn't know, it was my careful feeding of information to Marcus, keeping him engaged longer, encouraging him to extract more, push further, take bigger risks. The investigation revealed the beautiful complexity of Marcus's scheme. He'd incorporated Meredith into his fraud network, using her as a shield for his activities. While she thought she was building a future with him, he was building a criminal case against her. Every document she'd signed, every transfer she'd authorized, every contract she'd entered created a paper trail that led directly to her while Marcus remained a ghost. "He never gave me his real ID," she admitted to the detective. "I never questioned it. He said powerful people need privacy." "The man you knew as Marcus Blackwood doesn't exist," Detective Morse explained patiently. "His real name is Michael Brennan. He has 17 known aliases and 12 victims across 8 states. You're lucky number 13. Lucky. Meredith had spent years considering herself lucky for stealing what others had. Now luck had abandoned her, leaving only the consequences of her greed and blindness. That night, she called me from her empty apartment. The furniture had been repossessed that afternoon, leaving only a mattress on the floor and boxes of wedding supplies nobody wanted. "I'm sorry," she said, the words seemingly ripped from her throat. "For everything. Tyler James David, I see it now. What I did to you. Marcus did to me, but worse." "It's not the same," I said carefully. "No," she agreed. "What I did was crueler. I betrayed family. At least Marcus was a stranger." The admission cost her everything to make. I could hear her breaking apart on the other end of the line. Years of superiority and manipulation crumbling into dust. "What am I going to do, Rhonda? How do I fix this?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But running won't help. The investigators, the creditors, the victims, they'll find you. Your only option is to face it." "Will you help me?" The question came out small, childlike. "I know I don't deserve it, but I have no one else." I thought about 8 years of stolen boyfriends, family dinners, where I was painted as unstable, the casual cruelty of her victories. Then I thought about the notebook I'd found years ago, her calculated plans to destroy my happiness. "I'll think about it," I said, which was more than she deserved, but less than she needed. After we hung up, I sat in my comfortable apartment surrounded by the life I'd built while she was chasing Marcus's illusions. The plan had worked perfectly, perhaps too perfectly. I'd wanted justice, but watching total destruction felt different than I'd imagined. Tomorrow, the news would break publicly. Marcus's scheme would make headlines with Meredith's photo attached as his latest victim or possible accomplice. The remaining wedding gifts would need returning. The social media accounts celebrating their perfect love would need deleting. The future she'd imagined would need complete reimagining. But tonight, she sat alone in an empty apartment, finally understanding what it felt like to have everything stolen by someone you trusted. The teacher had finally graduated to student enrolled in a master class of manipulation that would cost her everything she'd taken, and more. The news broke on a Tuesday morning with a Business Insider headline that made my coffee cup freeze halfway to my lips. "Detroit woman central figure in multi-state financial fraud scheme." Below it, a photo of Meredith at one of Marcus's charity events, champagne in hand, designer dress gleaming, looking every inch the accomplice rather than victim. My phone exploded with notifications, former classmates, distant relatives. Everyone who'd watched Meredith's glamorous social media life suddenly had opinions about her downfall. The schadenfreude was thick enough to choke on. Your sister made CNN. Sarah informed me when I arrived at work, her tablet displaying footage of investigators carrying boxes from Meredith's apartment building. They're calling her either the biggest victim or the most incompetent criminal in Michigan. I kept my head down, claiming shock and distance from the situation. Nobody connected the dots between my heartbreak over Marcus and Meredith's destruction. To them, I was just collateral damage in my sister's ambitious schemes. The investigation's findings painted a damning picture. Meredith's signature appeared on shell company documents facilitating money laundering. Her bank accounts had received and dispersed funds linked to other fraud victims. Her name was on lease agreements for luxury cars that had been sold overseas. To investigators, she looked like Marcus's partner, not his prey. They think I knew, Meredith said during one of our meetings with her public defender, a harried woman named Janet, who'd seen too many cases like this. They think I was in on it from the beginning. Were you? Janet asked bluntly. Any jury will ask the same question. You signed documents without reading them. You participated in financial transfers without questioning their purpose. You lived a lifestyle your income couldn't support. How do we explain that without making you look complicit? I was in love, Meredith said weakly. I trusted him. Trust isn't a legal defense, Janet replied, especially when multiple people tried to warn you. The discovery process revealed the extent of Marcus's manipulation and Meredith's willful blindness. Text messages showed her dismissing concerns from friends. Emails documented her authorizing transfers, while Marcus fed her lies about international investments. Security footage from banks showed her signing documents with barely a glance too focused on wedding planning to notice she was authorizing fraud. But the most damaging evidence came from unexpected sources. Tyler Morrison, my first love whom Meredith had stolen 8 years ago, came forward with a statement that changed the investigation's direction. She did the same thing to me, he told investigators. Smaller scale, but the same pattern. She seduced me away from her sister, convinced me to invest in some marketing scheme, then disappeared when the money ran out. I lost $12,000 in my relationship with someone I actually loved. James Chen followed suit, detailing how Meredith had manipulated him into co-signing loans she never repaid. David Thornton, despite everything, tried to defend her but ended up providing evidence of her pattern of deception. She's not a criminal mastermind, David told Detective Morse. She's a narcissist who finally met a bigger predator, but she definitely has a history of financial exploitation in relationships. The local news picked up the pattern running segments titled, Serial Heartbreaker Meets Her Match, and From Predator to Prey, a Modern Cautionary Tale. They interviewed Meredith's former victims, painting a picture of a woman who'd spent years taking what wasn't hers until she'd finally taken from the wrong person. Former co-workers came forward with stories of Meredith stealing clients and credit for projects. College classmates recalled her cheating on exams and manipulating group project grades. Even childhood friends had tales of birthday money that went missing. Borrowed items, never returned, lies that destroyed friendships. I'm not that person anymore, Meredith insisted, as we sat in my apartment, the only place she could escape the media circus. I've changed. Marcus changed me. Marcus revealed you, I corrected. He showed everyone what you've always been. The only difference is scale. She flinched at the truth. Gone was the polished manipulator who'd tormented me for years. In her place sat a broken woman facing consequences for the first time in her life. The investigation took another turn when the FBI got involved. Marcus, or rather Michael Brennan, was wanted in connection with international wire fraud. His operations spanned countries, utilized cryptocurrency, and involved sums that made Meredith's losses look trivial. She was a small fish who'd gotten tangled in a net meant for sharks. "We can offer you a deal," Agent Rodriguez explained during a tense meeting. "Full cooperation against Brennan in exchange for reduced charges. But you need to tell us everything. No protecting him out of misguided loyalty." "Protect him," Meredith laughed bitterly. "I want him destroyed. Tell me what you need." What they needed was humiliating. Meredith had to detail every moment of manipulation, every sign she'd ignored, every warning she'd dismissed. She had to admit to her greed, her ambition, her willingness to sign anything for a lifestyle she couldn't afford. She had to acknowledge her own predatory history while explaining how she'd become prey. The media loved every moment. Meredith, the grifter, trended on Twitter. Reddit threads dissected her social media history, tracking the escalation of luxury and lies. TikTok creators made videos warning about Meredith-style manipulation in relationships. But the cruelest exposure came from Marcus himself. From wherever he was hiding, he released a statement through an intermediary that destroyed any remaining sympathy for Meredith. Ms. Palmer was a willing participant who believed she was scamming a wealthy man. She bragged about stealing from previous partners and saw our relationship as her biggest score. I merely gave her what she wanted, the illusion of wealth and the reality of consequences. Attached were recordings of Meredith discussing her past conquests, laughing about the men she'd manipulated, planning how to extract maximum value from their relationship. She sounded calculating, cold, everything the prosecution needed to paint her as a co-conspirator rather than victim. "He recorded everything," she whispered, as we listened to her voice, detailing how she'd stolen me from Tyler, then stolen Tyler from me. Every private moment, every confession, he was building a case against me from day one. "Just like you built cases against your victims," I observed. "Remember your journal, the one where you planned how to destroy my relationships?" She stared at me, recognition dawning. "You knew. You've known all along what he was." I didn't confirm or deny, just met her gaze steadily. "I knew what you were. Marcus was just someone who played your game better." The trial preparation revealed one final twist. Catherine Blackwood, Marcus's ex-wife, had been cooperating with authorities for months. She'd helped track his patterns, identify victims, trace financial movements. But her most significant contribution was a recorded conversation with Marcus from their divorce proceedings. "I only target women who deserve it," his voice explained on the tape. "Gold diggers, home wreckers, social climbers, women who've destroyed other women for sport. I'm not a criminal. I'm karma with a bank account." The recording reframed everything. Marcus didn't see himself as a con artist, but as an avenging angel, punishing women he deemed morally bankrupt. Meredith hadn't been randomly selected. She'd been specifically chosen because of her history of relationship destruction. "He knew about me before we met," she realized. "Someone told him, someone who knew my history, my patterns, my weaknesses." She looked at me again, but I remained silent. Some confessions weren't meant to be made, some victories too pyrrhic to claim. The exposure was complete. Every secret revealed, every manipulation documented, every victim given voice. Meredith sat in the wreckage of her life, finally understanding what it meant to lose everything to someone you'd underestimated. The girl who'd stolen my boyfriends for sport was now a cautionary tale, her name synonymous with greed meeting justice. And somewhere in the shadows, Marcus continued his twisted mission, hunting the next predator who thought herself untouchable. But first, there was a trial to face, a reckoning years in the making, and a sister to watch as she finally faced the consequences of a lifetime spent taking what wasn't hers. The morning of Meredith's first court appearance, she showed up at my apartment at 6 a.m. wearing the only professional outfit she had left, a dated blazer from her college years that hung loose on her stress-thinned frame. "I need to borrow shoes," she said quietly. "They repossessed everything designer. Janet says I need to look respectable but not wealthy." I let her in, wah-wahting as she moved through my space with none of her former predatory confidence. She selected a pair of modest black pumps, then sat on my couch staring at them as if they held answers. "I'm going to apologize," she announced suddenly, "to everyone, starting with you." Meredith? No, let me finish. She looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw my sister instead of my tormentor. I've spent 2 weeks in therapy, court mandated, but still. Do you know what narcissistic personality disorder combined with addiction to external validation looks like? It looks like me. Stealing boyfriends wasn't about the men. It was about proving I could, about watching you hurt and feeling powerful. Why? The question I'd asked myself 1,000 times finally voiced. What did I ever do to make you hate me so much? She laughed, but it was hollow. You existed. You were older, smarter, kinder. Everyone loved you naturally while I had to perform for attention. Mom and Dad compared us constantly. Why can't you be more like Rhonda? So I decided if I couldn't be you, I'd take everything that was yours. That's not an excuse, I said. No, it's an explanation. The excuse was my ego, my certainty that I deserved whatever I could take. But Marcus, she trailed off, shaking her head. Marcus showed me what it's like to be consumed by someone else's ego, to be reduced to nothing but a resource to exploit. We sat in silence until she needed to leave for court. At the door, she turned back. That journal, you found the one with my plans, I kept it. Even after Tyler, after James, I used to read it and feel clever. Now I realize it was evidence of how sick I was, how sick I still am. The courthouse was a media circus. Reporters shouted questions as we walked in, Meredith keeping her head down while Janet and I flanked her. The courtroom was packed with victims, creditors, and curiosity seekers, eager to see the woman who'd lost everything to a con man. The prosecutor, ADA Michelle Garrett, was ruthless in her opening statement. Ms. Palmer wants you to believe she's a victim, but evidence will show she has a pattern of financial exploitation in relationships spanning 8 years. She destroyed multiple lives before meeting someone who destroyed hers. This isn't a tragedy, it's poetic justice that unfortunately involved innocent creditors. Janet's defense was simpler. My client made terrible decisions based on manipulated emotions. She was targeted specifically because of her vulnerabilities. Yes, she has a problematic past, but that doesn't make her a criminal. It makes her a flawed person who fell for a professional predator. The testimony began with forensic accountants detailing the money trail. Every transaction was dissected, every signature analyzed. Meredith had to sit through hours of evidence showing her authorizing transfers, signing contracts, participating in what looked like elaborate fraud. I didn't know, she repeated during her testimony. Marcus explained everything as investments, tax strategies, business opportunities. I trusted him. The same way your previous boyfriends trusted you, ADA Garrett countered. Tyler Borison trusted you when you seduced him away from your sister. James Chen trusted you when you convinced him to co-sign loans. David Thornton trusted you when you manipulated your way into his life. How is what Marcus did to you any different from what you did to them? Because I never committed fraud, Meredith protested. I was cruel, manipulative, yes, but I didn't forge documents or create shell companies or you just destroyed people emotionally instead of financially. Yes, Meredith admitted quietly, and I'm not proud of it. The character witnesses were brutal. Tyler testified via video link describing how Meredith had convinced him to invest his graduate school savings in a marketing scheme that turned out to be her shopping fund. James detailed the credit damage from loans she'd defaulted on. Even David, despite his teacher's compassion, couldn't hide how her manipulations had affected his ability to trust. But the most damaging testimony came from our parents. They took the stand together, aged a decade in the past year, forced to detail their financial ruin. My mother wept as she described losing their home of 30 years. My father's voice cracked, explaining how their retirement had evaporated. We believed her, he said simply. She was our daughter. When she said this man would take care of her, that the investments would pay off, we wanted to believe. We mortgaged our future for her fairy tale. And now, the prosecutor asked, now we're living in a one-bedroom apartment, working jobs in our 70s to pay debts for a wedding that never happened. We'll never retire. That's our daughter's legacy. Meredith broke down completely during their testimony. For someone who'd spent years cultivating an image of perfection, watching her parents detail their destruction because of her choices was the ultimate reckoning. The trial took a turn when Catherine Blackwood testified. Marcus's ex-wife commanded the courtroom with quiet authority, detailing her own experience while drawing parallels to Meredith's case. Marcus is brilliant at identifying women with specific vulnerabilities, she explained. Usually childhood trauma, narcissistic tendencies, a history of using relationships for gain. He sees himself as teaching lessons to women who hurt others. "Do you believe Miss Palmer deserved what happened to her?" Janet asked. Catherine considered carefully. "No one deserves to be destroyed, but I understand why Marcus chose her. She fit his profile perfectly, someone who'd hurt others without consequence, who believed she was too smart to be fooled, who valued material success over genuine connection. In his twisted way, he probably thought he was delivering justice." When it was my turn to testify, I faced my sister across the courtroom. Years of pain, resentment, and carefully orchestrated revenge had led to this moment. "Describe your relationship with the defendant," Ada Garrett instructed. "Complicated," I began. "Meredith is my younger sister. For 8 years, she systematically targeted and stole every man I dated. It became her pattern, her obsession. She would study what I loved about them, transform herself to match their interests, then seduce them away. How did this affect you?" I stopped trusting not just romantic partners, but everyone. I went to therapy, I isolated myself, I watched her parade my stolen boyfriends at family events while our parents told me I was being too sensitive. "Did you ever want revenge?" The question hung in the air. I could feel Meredith's eyes on me, see the recognition dawning on faces throughout the courtroom. "Yes," I admitted. "I wanted her to understand what it felt like to have everything taken by someone you trusted. But I also wanted her to stop, to get help, to become the sister I lost to jealousy and cruelty." "Did you know Marcus Blackwood before he met your sister?" This was the moment. I could destroy Meredith, completely admit to orchestrating her downfall, or I could give her something she'd never given me: mercy. "I met him briefly at a conference," I said carefully. "He seemed successful, but something felt off. When he showed interest in me, I kept my distance. I warned Meredith when they met, but she didn't listen. She never listened when she wanted something that was mine. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. I had warned her in my way. She just hadn't recognized the warning for what it was." The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, Meredith stood on shaking legs to hear her fate. Guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, but with recommendation for leniency given the circumstances. Guilty of financial crimes, but acknowledged as a victim of a larger scheme. The sentence was 3 years probation, 600 hours of community service, mandatory therapy, and restitution payments that would take decades to complete. No jail time, but a criminal record that would follow her forever. As court officers processed the paperwork, Meredith turned to me. "You knew," she said quietly. "You knew exactly what he was, and you let me walk into it. The same way you knew Tyler was mine and took him anyway. The same way you knew James trusted you and you exploited it. The same way you knew David loved me and you destroyed it." I met her gaze steadily. "Difference is, I warned you multiple times. You just thought you were smarter than everyone else. So this was revenge." "This was consequences," I corrected. "Something you'd never faced before. Marcus was going to find victims regardless. I just made sure one of them was someone who'd spent years victimizing others." She absorbed this, then surprised me by nodding. I deserved it. Not all of it. Our parents didn't deserve this, but I deserved to finally face what I'd done to others. "The question is what you do now," I said. "You can be bitter play victim forever, or you can actually change, become someone worth being sisters with. Would you want that after everything?" I thought about the 8 years of pain, the careful orchestration of her downfall, the satisfaction that felt hollow now that it was achieved. "Ask me in 3 years," I said finally, "when your probation is up and we see who you've become." As we left the courthouse, reporters shouting questions we ignored, I realized the reckoning wasn't just for Meredith. I'd spent so long focused on revenge that I'd become someone I didn't entirely recognize. Maybe we both needed those 3 years to figure out who we wanted to be. The cycle of taking and being taken had finally broken. What would grow in its place remained to be seen. 6 months into Meredith's probation, everything changed with a phone call from Detective Morse. "We've located Marcus," she said without preamble. "Real name Michael Brennan, arrested in Miami trying to flee to Cuba. He's being extradited to Michigan. We need you and your sister to testify." I found Meredith at her community service assignment teaching financial literacy at a women's shelter. The court's ironic sentence for someone who'd lost everything to financial illiteracy. She was explaining predatory lending to a group of women when I arrived, her voice steady despite the subject matter hitting close to home. "He's been caught," I told her after class. "They want us to testify." Her face went through several emotions before settling on determination. "Good. I have questions for him." The months of probation had changed Meredith. Gone was the designer-clad manipulator. She worked 2 jobs, administrative assistant by day, grocery store stalker at night, to pay restitution. She lived in a studio apartment in a rough part of town, took the bus everywhere, and hadn't touched social media since the trial. "I've been going to group therapy," she told me as we prepared for Marcus's trial, "for people with personality disorders." Do you know what the hardest part is? Realizing I wasn't special. Every narcissist thinks they're unique, but we all follow the same patterns. Marcus and I were basically the same person, just different scales. Working together to build the case against Marcus required a level of cooperation we'd never achieved as sisters. I provided the metadata, evidence I'd quietly collected, the patterns I'd observed, the connections I'd traced. Meredith offered insider knowledge of his techniques, psychological insights from her therapy, and most importantly, a willingness to be completely honest about her own motivations. "He chose me because I was exactly like him," she explained to the federal prosecutors. "A predator who thought I was too smart to become prey. That's his type. Women who've hurt others who deserve what he considers justice." The investigation revealed the stunning scope of Marcus's operations. 17 victims across 12 states, millions in stolen funds, a network of enablers who helped him disappear and reinvent himself after each score. But Meredith's case was different. She was the first victim to survive with enough evidence and motivation to fight back. "Most victims just want to forget," Agent Rodriguez explained. "They're embarrassed, financially ruined, emotionally destroyed. They take whatever deal gets them out fastest, but you want him buried." "He didn't just steal money," Meredith said fiercely. "He stole my ability to trust, to love, to believe in anything. He made me see myself clearly for the first time, and while I needed that mirror, he doesn't get to walk away thinking he's some righteous avenger." We spent weeks preparing, going through evidence, reconstructing timelines. Other victims joined us, forming a support group that met weekly to share stories and strengthen resolve. Catherine Blackwood became our unofficial leader, her experience and sophistication guiding us through the legal maze. "He'll try to charm his way out," she warned during one meeting. "He'll paint himself as a vigilante, claim he only targeted women who deserved it. Don't let him flip the narrative." The trial began in federal court, the charges upgraded to interstate fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. Marcus, Michael Brennan, sat at the defense table looking smaller than I remembered, his expensive suit replaced by a federal jumpsuit, his predatory charm diminished by ankle shackles. Mr. Brennan operated a sophisticated scheme targeting vulnerable women, the federal prosecutor began. He identified victims with specific psychological profiles, exploited their weaknesses, and systematically destroyed their lives while enriching himself. He is not a vigilante. He is a predator who happened to choose other predators as prey. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing money flowing through dozens of shell companies, Recordings of Marcus bragging about his conquests, documents proving he'd researched victims for months before approach, studying their histories, their weaknesses, their financial resources. He had a file on me, Meredith testified, holding up a folder inches thick, dating back 2 years before we met. He knew about every man I'd ever dated, every financial decision I'd made, every vulnerability I had. He didn't fall for me at that fundraiser. He'd been hunting me for months. "How does that make you feel?" the prosecutor asked. "Like I did to others," she admitted. "I used to keep journals planning how to steal men from my sister. The only difference is scale and sophistication. We're both predators. I just met a bigger shark." Marcus's defense tried to paint him as a modern Robin Hood, punishing bad women while giving to charity. But the forensics showed the charity donations were minimal, mostly for show, while the bulk of stolen funds went to his lavish lifestyle. "You targeted Miss Palmer specifically because of her history," his attorney asked during cross-examination. "She was perfect," Marcus admitted with a smile that made my skin crawl. "Beautiful, greedy, narcissistic, and convinced she was playing me while I played her. Women like her deserve to learn lessons." "So you admit to selecting victims based on their moral failings?" "I selected victims based on their ability to pay," he corrected. "Their moral failings just made it more satisfying." The other victims testified one by one, each story following the same pattern but with unique cruelties. Marcus had a gift for identifying exactly what each woman wanted most and dangling it just out of reach while draining their resources. When my turn came, I provided the technical evidence that connected dots the prosecutors couldn't. Browser histories showing Marcus researching victims, metadata proving documents were forged, financial patterns revealing the systematic nature of his crimes. "You seem to have done extensive research into Mr. Brennan's methods," his attorney observed, "almost as if you were studying him." "I was protecting myself," I replied carefully. "My sister had stolen multiple boyfriends. When Marcus appeared, I recognized a fellow predator. I documented everything I could." "Did you warn your sister?" "Multiple times. She didn't listen. She never listened when she wanted something she thought was mine." The trial revealed something unexpected. Marcus had partners, a network of people who helped identify victims, create false identities, move money. The investigation expanded, leading to arrests across the country. "Ms. Palmer was supposed to be my last score," Marcus admitted during a particularly revealing moment. "I was planning to retire, disappear to South America. She had the perfect combination of resources and hubris. I just needed her to liquidate everything, then I'd vanish." "What went wrong?" the prosecutor asked. "She held onto one thing," he said, looking directly at me, "that grandmother's necklace. She wouldn't sell it even when desperate. Made me think someone was advising her, protecting certain assets. That's when I started rushing, making mistakes." I kept my expression neutral, but inside I felt a cold satisfaction. The necklace I'd anonymously purchased had been the tiny weight that unbalanced his entire scheme. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts. The sentence, 25 years federal prison, no possibility of parole for 15 full restitution to all victims. As they led Marcus away, he paused near our table. "You played me," he said to me, "not Meredith. This whole thing. You orchestrated it, used your sister as bait." "Prove it," I replied quietly. "I don't need to." He smiled. "We both know the truth. You're just like us. You just pick your targets more carefully." After he was gone, Meredith turned to me. "Is he right? Did you plan this?" "I planned for justice," I said. "For both of us. You needed to face consequences. He needed to be stopped. Sometimes justice requires unconventional methods. So you sacrificed me. I gave you a choice. Every step of the way you had chances to walk away. You chose greed over wisdom, pride over safety, just like you chose to steal from me over being a sister." She absorbed this, then surprised me by taking my hand. "Thank you for destroying your life." "For saving it," she corrected. "If Marcus hadn't shown me who I was, I'd still be that person. Still hurting others, still empty inside, still chasing validation through cruelty. Prison would have been easier than facing myself, but you made sure I had to live with clarity instead of comfortable delusions. The victim support group celebrated that night. 17 women who'd been destroyed by the same man finally seeing justice served. The restitution would take years to materialize, but the symbolic victory mattered more than money. To the Palmer sisters, Catherine toasted, who turned pain into justice and showed us all how to fight back. As I clinked glasses with Meredith, I realized something had shifted between us. We weren't friends. Too much damage lay between us for that. But we were no longer enemies. We were survivors of our own toxic patterns, breaking cycles that had defined us for too long. Justice had been served not just in Marcus's sentence, but in the harder work of facing ourselves and choosing to change. The pursuit was over. Now came the harder part, building something new from the ashes of what we'd burned down. The federal marshals led Marcus Blackwood, Michael Brennan, into the courtroom for the final time, his designer suit days long gone, replaced by federal orange that made his skin look sallow. The man who had destroyed 17 lives across 12 states was about to face the collective weight of justice. Judge Patricia Hawthorne, known for her no-nonsense approach to financial crimes, reviewed the stack of victim impact statements with a grim expression. The courtroom was packed with Marcus's victims, their families, investigators who'd spent years tracking him, and media capturing every moment of the high-profile sentencing. "Mr. Brennan," Judge Hawthorne began, her voice cutting through the tension, "you stand convicted of 47 counts of wire fraud, 18 counts of money laundering, 12 counts of identity theft, and 1 count of racketeering. The advisory guidelines suggest 15 to 20 years. However, guidelines cannot capture the scope of devastation you've caused." She lifted the first statement. "Rebecca Morrison from Kansas writes that she attempted suicide after you stole her children's college funds. Sarah Chen from California lost her family business that had been operating for 3 generations. Patricia Williams from Texas was forced into bankruptcy at age 62, losing her home and retirement savings." With each name, each story, Marcus's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. He'd always seen his victims as abstract concepts deserving targets. Now they were real people with real pain filling the courtroom with their presence. "Your victims total 17 women directly, but the ripple effects touched hundreds. Their children, parents, employees, communities. You didn't just steal money, you stole future security and the ability to trust." Meredith was called to deliver her victim impact statement. She stood at the podium, papers trembling in her hands, but her voice remained steady. "Your Honor, Michael Brennan targeted me because he recognized a kindred spirit. I had spent years manipulating men, stealing from my sister, believing I was entitled to whatever I could take. He saw that ugliness in me and exploited it perfectly." She paused, looking directly at Marcus. "But here's what you miscalculated. Your destruction forced me to face myself in ways comfort never could have. While you ran from consequence after consequence, reinventing yourself with each new victim, I had to sit in the wreckage you created and rebuild from nothing. I work 2 minimum wage jobs now. I live in a studio apartment with bars on the windows. I take the bus because you destroyed my credit so thoroughly I can't even lease a used car. But you know what? I sleep peacefully for the first time in my adult life, because I'm no longer the person you recognized as worthy of destruction. You thought you were teaching me a lesson, delivering karma, but karma doesn't require a federal prison sentence. You're not an agent of justice. You're a criminal who found a way to monetize cruelty while feeding your ego. The only lesson you taught was that predators eventually meet bigger predators, and sometimes they meet the law." She returned to her seat, and I squeezed her hand as she sat down. Other victims followed each statement, adding weight to the scales of justice. Marcus's attorney tried to interject with pleas for leniency based on his client's psychological compulsion to punish bad actors, but Judge Hawthorne shut him down quickly. "Your client didn't target criminals," she said sharply. "He targeted women with vulnerabilities he could exploit. That some of them had moral failings doesn't make him a vigilante. It makes him a predator who chose his hunting grounds carefully. The FBI's financial crimes expert testified about the sophistication of Marcus's network, revealing new details that stunned even those of us who thought we knew the full scope. Mr. Brennan employed 14 individuals across 6 states to identify and research targets. He had a scoring system ranking women by their financial resources, psychological vulnerabilities, and what he termed moral bankruptcy. He operated like a corporation with quarterly targets and profit projections. This wasn't a man driven by psychological compulsion, the expert continued. This was a CEO running a criminal enterprise with calculated precision. When it came time for Marcus to speak, he stood with the same confident posture that had charmed so many women to their doom. Your Honor, I don't deny my actions, but I ask you to consider the context. Every woman I targeted had histories of destroying others. Miss Palmer admitted she stole multiple men from her sister. Rebecca Morrison embezzled from her first husband. Sarah Chen built her business on predatory practices targeting elderly immigrants. So you appointed yourself judge and jury, Judge Hawthorne interrupted. I provided consequences where none existed, Marcus replied smoothly. These women operated without accountability until they met me. Mr. Brennan, the judge leaned forward. You researched Miss Morrison's divorce records to find vulnerability to exploit. You discovered Ms. Chen's language barrier with her parents to isolate her from support. You studied Miss Palmer's narcissistic patterns to mirror and manipulate them. This wasn't justice. This was targeted torture of vulnerable individuals for profit. The revelation of Marcus's research files shocked even hardened investigators. Psychological profiles worthy of FBI behavioral analysis units, financial investigations that would impress forensic accountants, social engineering playbooks that could serve as textbooks in manipulation. He spent an average of 6 months studying each victim before approach. Agent Rodriguez testified, longer than many law enforcement investigations. He knew these women better than they knew themselves, then used that knowledge as a weapon. The most damning evidence came from Marcus's own records, a journal where he rated his conquests not by money earned but by devastation caused. Palmer, 910, one entry read, complete financial ruin, family destroyed, criminal investigation pending. Only deduction kept one sentimental item despite desperation. Investigate if someone advised her. Catherine Blackwood, Marcus's ex-wife and first known victim, gave the final victim statement. Michael Brennan doesn't see women as people, she said with quiet dignity. He sees us as puzzles to solve, safes to crack, games to win. He told me once that the money was just keeping score. What he really enjoyed was watching strong women break. Your Honor, he will not reform. He will not feel remorse. If released, he will simply see it as an opportunity to refine his methods. The only protection society has is keeping him separated from potential victims as long as legally possible. Judge Hawthorne nodded thoughtfully, then began her sentencing remarks. Mr. Brennan, you've presented yourself as a sophisticated professional exposing the moral failures of others. But strip away the designer suits and psychological justifications, and you're simply a con man with delusions of grandeur. You caused immeasurable suffering while enriching yourself. You destroyed families, ruined retirements, and shattered lives. You did this knowingly, methodically, and without remorse. Worse, you derive satisfaction from your victims' pain, rating their destruction like a game score. The court sentences you to 25 years federal incarceration, no possibility of parole before 15 years. You will pay full restitution to all victims totaling $8.7 million. Your assets will be liquidated and distributed according to the Victim Impact Fund guidelines. Additionally, upon release, you will be prohibited from any employment involving financial advisement, restricted from internet usage without supervision, and required to maintain a minimum 1,000-foot distance from all identified victims. Marcus's composure finally cracked. 25 years, Your Honor. I'm 43 years old. This is effectively a life sentence. Then perhaps, Judge Hawthorne replied coldly, You should have considered that before destroying 17 lives. Court is adjourned. As marshals led Marcus away, he twisted to look at our section one last time. His eyes met mine, and I saw something I'd never seen in them before. Genuine fear. The predator had finally become prey to the one force he couldn't charm, manipulate, or escape justice. Outside the courthouse, the victims gathered in an impromptu celebration. Women who'd been isolated in shame now stood together in triumph. The restitution would trickle in slowly from his liquidated assets, but the symbolic victory meant more than money. 8.7 million in restitution, someone calculated, divided by 17 victims. It doesn't matter, Catherine interrupted. Even if we each only see pennies, we saw him sentenced. We saw him afraid. That's worth more than any settlement. Meredith stood slightly apart from the group, still uncertain of her place among victims given her own predatory history. But Rebecca Morrison, the woman from Kansas who'd attempted suicide, approached her. "Thank you for your honesty in there," she said, "about being like him. It helped the judge see that even predators can be victims, that his targeting didn't make him righteous." "I'm not proud of who I was," Meredith replied. "None of us are proud of being fooled," Rebecca said, "but we're all proud of fighting back." As the crowd dispersed, Meredith and I walked to a nearby coffee shop, the first time we'd been truly alone together since this all began. "So what now?" she asked, stirring sugar into her coffee with hands that no longer wore designer rings. "Now you serve your probation, pay your restitution, build a life based on something other than taking from others." "And us?" she ventured. "What happens to us?" I considered the question. 8 years of theft and cruelty couldn't be erased by shared victory over Marcus. But watching her transform from predator to prey to survivor had shifted something fundamental between us. "We're not the same people we were when this started," I said finally. "You're not the sister who stole from me, and I'm not the victim who orchestrated revenge. Maybe we can figure out who we are to each other now." "I'd like that," she said quietly. "I know I can't undo the past. Tyler, James, David, I can't give them back. But maybe I can be the sister you deserve to have all along." "Maybe," I agreed. "Time will tell." As we left the courthouse behind, I felt the weight of 8 years lifting. The verdict was injustice was served, and 2 sisters who'd destroyed each other had a chance to rebuild. It wouldn't be easy or quick, but for the first time in almost a decade, it felt possible. The cycle of predator and prey was broken. What remained was the harder work of healing forgiveness and discovering who we could be when we weren't defined by what we'd taken or what had been taken from us. 1 year later, I stood in the small backyard of Meredith's apartment complex, helping her hang white string lights between the fence posts. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the neighbor's barbecue. It was a far cry from the chateau in Saint-Tropez where she'd once planned to marry Marcus, but the modest setting held something more valuable: authenticity. "A little higher on the left," Meredith called out, steadying the ladder while I adjusted the lights. "Paul's tall. I don't want him getting tangled during the ceremony." Paul Martinez was nothing like the men Meredith used to pursue. A high school math teacher she'd met during her community service, he drove a 10-year-old Toyota, lived in a duplex, and thought a fancy date meant trying the new Thai place downtown. He also looked at my sister like she hung the moon, even knowing her complete history. I told him everything on our 3rd date. Meredith had confided 6 months ago, about stealing boyfriends, about Marcus, about the trial. I figured he'd run. Instead, he said, "So you're telling me you've already made all your worst mistakes? That's actually reassuring." The wedding guest list was small, 20 people who'd stood by Meredith through her fall and rebuilding. Our parents looking healthier after a year of financial counseling and downsizing to a manageable apartment. A few women from her therapy group, her sponsor from Debtors Anonymous, Paul's family who'd welcomed her despite knowing her past, and me, the maid of honor, a role I'd never imagined accepting. "Rhonda, can you check the playlist?" Meredith asked, handing me her phone. "Paul thinks we need more slow songs." I scrolled through the modest selection. No live orchestra or celebrity DJ, just a carefully curated Spotify list. As I added a few romantic classics, a text popped up from David Thornton. Tell Meredith congratulations. I'm happy she found her person. David says congratulations, I told her. She paused in untangling lights, genuine surprise on her face. He does after everything. People can forgive when they see real change, I said. He's engaged now to another teacher at his school. They're happy. Good, she said softly. That's good. The morning of the wedding, I helped Meredith get ready in her bedroom. Her dress was from a consignment shop, altered by a seamstress from her therapy group. Simple cream fabric, no designer label, but it fit perfectly and made her glow in a way no $40,000 gown ever had. I need to tell you something, she said as I helped with her zipper. I've been saving this for today. She pulled out an envelope worn from handling. Inside was a cashier's check made out to me. It's not much, she said quickly. $5,000, but it's the first installment of what I owe you. Not court-ordered restitution, personal debt. For Tyler, for James, for David. For 8 years of being a terrible sister. Meredith, you don't— I do, she interrupted. Paul helped me calculate it, what I spent of money they gave me, what you lost in therapy, costs moving expenses when you couldn't face family events. It comes to about $60,000 total. I'll pay it back over the next 12 years, same timeline as my restitution to Marcus's victims. I stared at the check, overwhelmed by the gesture. It wasn't about the money. $5,000 was a significant amount for someone working 2 jobs and living paycheck to paycheck. It was about accountability, genuine acknowledgement of harm done. There's more, she said, pulling out a second envelope. For Mom and Dad. Paul and I are taking over one of their loan payments. It's only $200 a month, but it'll help them retire eventually instead of working forever. How can you afford— We can't really, she admitted with a small laugh. We'll have a courthouse wedding live in his duplex, shop sales for everything. But Paul says starting marriage by fixing past damage is worth more than any honeymoon. I hugged her then, feeling my carefully maintained walls finally crumble. You've really changed. Marcus broke me down to nothing, she said into my shoulder, but maybe I needed to be nothing before I could become something better. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Paul's nephew played guitar. Our father walked Meredith down the narrow aisle between folding chairs. The vows were ones they'd written themselves, full of promises about honesty, accountability, and building rather than taking. I promise to earn your trust every day, Meredith said to Paul, her voice steady despite tears. To choose creation over destruction, giving over taking truth over manipulation. I promise to be the partner you deserve, not because I'm perfect, but because I'm committed to growing. Paul's vows were equally moving. I promise to see you fully, past and present flaws and growth. To love not just who you're becoming, but who you fought to stop being. To build our life on foundation of truth, even when lies would be easier. When the officiant pronounced them married, the small crowd erupted in genuine joy. These were people who'd seen Meredith at rock bottom, who'd watched her climb out through hard work and harder honesty. Their celebration carried weight that no society wedding could match. At the reception, held in the apartment complex's community room with potluck dishes and borrowed decorations, I gave my maid of honor speech. 8 years ago, I lost my sister to jealousy and greed. I began looking at Meredith's tear-streaked face. She became someone I didn't recognize, someone who took pleasure in causing pain. I spent years hating her, then plotting against her, then watching her fall. But from that destruction came resurrection. The woman sitting here isn't the sister who stole from me. She's someone new, someone brave enough to face her demons and strong enough to change. She's someone who works 2 jobs to pay back debts, who sponsors other women in recovery, who chooses love over luxury. I raised my plastic cup of champagne. To Meredith and Paul, proof that our worst mistakes don't have to define us, that redemption is possible, and that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what really matters. The room erupted in applause, and Meredith hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Thank you," she whispered. "For the speech, for the chance, for not giving up on me even when you gave up on us." "I never gave up," I admitted. I just took a really complicated path to get here. Later, as the reception wound down, I found myself in quiet conversation with Catherine Blackwood, who'd surprised everyone by attending. "You orchestrated all of this, didn't you?" she said quietly, watching Meredith laugh with Paul's family. Marcus, the downfall, everything. I met her knowing gaze. "Does it matter now?" "I suppose not," she smiled. "Though I have to say, using a con artist to destroy a narcissist to save a sister, that's either brilliant or insane." "Maybe both," I agreed, "but it worked. We're all free now. You from Marcus's shadow, Meredith, from her patterns, me from my anger. And Marcus from society for another 14 years, she added with satisfaction. As the evening ended, I helped clean up, watching Meredith and Paul work seamlessly together, stacking chairs and collecting dishes. No designer gown to protect, no image to maintain, just two people building a life together. "Hey," Meredith called out, "Paul's mom made extra tamales, wants to take some home." Such a simple offer, but it meant everything. For the first time in 8 years, my sister was offering to share instead of take. "I'd love some," I replied. As I drove home that night, tamales warming my passenger seat, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. I'd wanted justice for years, of theft and pain. What I'd gotten was far more complicated. Destruction and resurrection, revenge and redemption, the end of who we were and the beginning of who we could be. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my heart raced, thinking it might be Marcus from prison. But it was Tyler Morrison, my first love from so many years ago. "Heard about Meredith's wedding from a mutual friend. Glad you both found peace. I did too. Married with twins now. Amazing how time changes everything." I smiled, texting back a simple "congratulations, wishing you all happiness." And I meant it. The cycle was truly broken. Tyler, James, David, Marcus, Meredith, me. We'd all played our parts in a drama of taking and being taken. Now finally, we were free to write different stories. I pulled into my driveway, safe in my own space, bought with my own success, carrying food, shared freely by a sister who'd learned to give. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more payments on old debts, continued work on damaged relationships. But tonight, there was peace. The war was over, and somehow, against all odds, everyone had won. If you've made it this far in Rhonda and Meredith's story, you've witnessed how revenge and redemption can intertwine in the most unexpected ways. We all have relationships that test us, people who push us to our limits, and moments when we must choose between perpetuating cycles of hurt or breaking free. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to forgive someone who seemed unforgivable, or been forgiven when you thought redemption was impossible? What would you have done in Rhonda's position? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional journeys that explore the complexity of human relationships. Share this with someone who might need to hear that change is possible, that even the deepest wounds can heal, and that sometimes the best revenge is helping someone become better than they were. Thank you for joining me on this journey through betrayal, justice, and ultimately healing. Remember, we all have the power to break our destructive patterns and choose growth over grievance. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in destroying those who hurt us, but in finding the strength to rebuild and the wisdom to forgive. Until next time, may you find the courage to face your truth and the grace to transform it into something beautiful.